Hello there. Tonight we time travel back to a world of muddy streets, church bells, and love letters written in chicken scratch Latin. You're standing in the middle of a medieval market square, and oh boy, what is that smell? It's a lovely cocktail of sweaty leather, ox dung, and the faint tang of fermented cabbage. Romance, baby. The kind you can smell before you see it. Everything feels close, claustrophobically so. Wooden stalls lean into each other like they've had too much mead, and every shout echoes off cobblestone and timber. Somewhere, a donkey brays like it just got dumped, and in the background, minstrels attempt something vaguely musical. This, dear listener, is where your love story begins. You, in your slightly too warm wool tunic and shoes that squish a little too much when you walk, are on the prowl. But don't get too excited, you probably won't survive this century. Dysentery's just one ill-advised flotation away. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sidestep a puddle, or try to. It's unclear if it's water or something worse. Across the square, someone catches your eye. Could be love. Could be fleas. But before you can smile, your stomach growls. No one ever mentions how romance and survival intertwine here. Your breath is likely offensive by modern standards, but don't worry, so is everyone else's. Mint hasn't become a toothpaste staple yet, and brushing teeth usually involves ash or a rough linen rag if you're fancy. You sniff the air. Roasted onion? Boiled eel? No, it's the unmistakable bouquet of humanity without plumbing. Strangely, people do fall in love here. They even woo each other despite smelling like old cheese wrapped in sweat. Historians still argue whether medieval folks even noticed the stench or if it just faded into the background, like today's traffic noise. But it's certain that strong smells carried social meaning. Clove-stuffed oranges, rosewater dabs behind the ear, or wearing herbs in your armpits were all signs someone cared about their, well, appeal. A well-scented person was practically erotic. That person across the square? They've got a sprig of lavender tucked behind their belt. You're intrigued. Is it romance? Witchcraft? Or maybe they just hate flies. You try to look your best. Hair's sort of combed, by fingers. Clothes are marginally cleaner than yesterday's. You tug your belt higher, hoping the rat-chewed hem of your tunic looks like a trendy design choice. Fashion here is often unintentional. Unless you're noble, you own maybe 3 outfits max, and wash them less than you'd like. Which is to say, rarely. You remember that garlic you rubbed on your boots? Yeah, turns out it was a folk remedy for warding off bad luck. Or attracting goats. You're not sure anymore. Still, you strut forward, hopeful. Your first hurdle, the market crowd. It's less a collection of people and more a sea of elbows, baskets, and the occasional loose piglet. Someone slaps a fish onto a table inches from your face. A bartering widow elbows you in the gut. Romance may require armor. Finally, you're near the lavender-belted stranger. They're looking at you, or possibly at a pair. It's hard to tell. You clear your throat. Nothing. You try again, louder. They glance over. You grin. They sniff. You panic. Maybe the garlic wasn't such a good idea. Your mind races. What was that line you heard the merchant use on the tanner's daughter? Something about flaxen hair and strong thighs? No, too specific. You try instead a timeless classic, lovely weather, for a plague year. They blink. not smiling, but not walking away. Promising. The smell of dung wafts up again. Timing. You quickly add, though the breeze makes it tolerable. They chuckle. Victory. You learn their name, though you probably mishear it under the clamour. Names back then often blend together like stew. Ejifu? Edwina? You nod as if you understand. There's flirting now, medieval style. It's subtle, shared glances, careful comments about grain prices, and maybe a soft touch to the arm, unless chaperoned. And of course, you are. There's a goose seller watching from a stall, clearly invested in your romantic future. A mainstream historical fact here, body odor didn't carry the same social disgust it does now. In fact, some believed sweat was a sign of a strong constitution. A hard-working person reeked of virtue. Court records occasionally mention lovers describing each other's natural musk with actual fondness. It's oddly sweet. The lavender stranger leans closer and says, "You don't smell half as bad as the cobbler's boy." Your heart flutters. You've just received what passes for a compliment. You offer them a pear. It's bruised. They accept. Love. There's a strange little ritual some lovers followed, you've heard whispers of it. A suitor might gift their beloved a dried slice of apple they'd held under their armpit all day. If the object of affection ate it, that meant love. If they gagged or ran, well, not so much. You consider this, tuck the idea away for later. The bell tolls. It's noon. Time to pretend you're returning to work, or church, or wherever your family expects you. You nod a farewell. The stranger hands you the lavender sprig. Keep this, they say. It wards off fleas. Your heart soars. You will name your first goat after them. You walk away grinning, clutching the herb, ignoring the muddy splatter that just hit your boot. Your path is blocked by a flock of chickens. One poops directly on your foot. You barely notice. Because here, in the damp, messy, wonderfully pungent heart of medieval life, someone just said you didn't stink that bad. That's basically a love sonnet. You're still grinning like a fool when you return home. Well, home is a generous word for the one-room wooden cube you share with 6 family members, 2 hens, and a roof that leaks exclusively on your straw pile. But tonight, you've got a sprig of lavender, and that makes the moldy corner feel downright luxurious. Still, don't get ahead of yourself. Because before you can even think of romance, there's one particular topic that looms large over medieval dating: virginity. It's not just a personal detail. Oh no, it's a full-on economic asset, and people track it like gold. Your virginity is basically your dowry's emotional support animal, constantly evaluated, fiercely protected, and publicly assumed unless proven otherwise. If you're a woman, especially of marrying age, it can determine the social standing of your entire family. If you're a man, well, people assume you'll do what men do, but heaven forbid your future bride has a wrinkle in her reputation. Your grandmother once whispered that a noblewoman in Kent lost her marriage prospects and half her inheritance because a rival spread a rumor she had kissed someone behind a monastery wall. Just kissed. Historians still argue whether these rigid standards were applied as strictly as the sermons claimed, or if, behind closed doors and tapestry curtains, rules got bent. So let's talk about how virginity is verified. Spoiler alert, science is not invited. The most common method? A visual exam of the bride after the wedding night. If the sheets show blood, hooray! Your daughter was pure, now here's your cattle. No blood? That's a problem. Doesn't matter if it's due to anatomy, nerves, or just a tidy first time, you're going to have some awkward morning after conversations with in-laws. You hear of cases where families stash a pigeon's heart under the bed or pre-soak sheets with animal blood. It's a performance. And oddly enough, no one questions the groom's purity. His virtue isn't measured in poultry parts. Meanwhile, certain beliefs persist. For instance, a woman who loses her virginity before marriage might be thought to lose her value entirely. In many regions, especially among the merchant class, that meant her chance of marrying into a decent house was gone. And yet, the contradictions abound. Courtly love songs sing of passionate affairs, knights pine for married noble women, and rumors swirl constantly of trysts between highborn ladies and stable hands. It's almost like public virtue and private behavior don't always line up. Imagine that. A quirky tidbit: in parts of rural France, a wedding tradition involved parading the used bedsheet around town like it was a victory flag. Everyone applauded. Kids threw flowers. Somewhere in the distance, a priest likely muttered prayers while pretending not to notice. You try not to picture this too hard. But you can't escape the economic layer to it all. Marriage isn't just about two people, it's a merger. Love is secondary, first comes land, alliances, and social climbing. A marriage between merchant families might seal a new trade route. A union between peasants might mean 2 plough oxen instead of 1. And virginity? That's the unspoken insurance policy. Of course, some families take this seriously enough to hire, brace yourself, professional virginity preservers. These are older women, often widows or nuns, who essentially babysit eligible daughters from the moment they sprout a curve. They're the medieval version of helicopter parenting, only with more rosaries and significantly worse bedtime stories. You once met one of these women, a crabby spinster with a cane that doubled as a weapon. She followed her charge everywhere, even to the privy. Love, she croaked, is a disease. It rots the soul and the inheritance. You smiled politely and decided not to ask her opinion on lavender boys. For noble girls, the scrutiny goes even further. Some are sent to nunneries not to become nuns, but to be safely stored until marriage negotiations are finalized. It's like being cryogenically frozen, but with extra prayers and itchy habits. Occasionally, a clever girl escapes this fate by claiming a calling from God, entering holy orders before a suitor can lock her down. But such declarations are rarely believed unless followed by actual celibacy. And let's be honest, some monasteries are basically Tinder with a Latin soundtrack. Still, for all the pressure and surveillance, love finds a way. You overhear 2 bakers' apprentices whispering behind a rain barrel, sharing dreams of running off together. One has no dowry, the other's already been promised to a blacksmith's daughter with thighs strong enough to knead dough without hands. Romantic. They both know it's unlikely, but that doesn't stop them from dreaming. There's something rebellious about it, loving despite the rules. Not because of what you're expected to be, but because of who you really are. Even if society screams, wait until marriage, your heart sometimes yells, yeah, but what if now? And then there's the church. Oh yes. The church's views on sexuality are both detailed and confusing. Officially, sex is for procreation only. Anything pleasurable is suspect, and desire outside of marriage is considered sinful. Yet at the same time, they write manuals on when and how it's acceptable, ban certain positions, yes, really, and issue penances for everything from impure dreams to making eye contact with the wrong shepherd. You once sat through a sermon where the priest warned that premarital touching might result in leprosy. The woman next to you crossed herself. You just tried not to blush. Still, the church wields enormous influence over marriage law. You need a priest's blessing to make it legit, though in practice, many common folk just vow themselves to each other before witnesses and call it done. These informal unions are later contested in court when land or legitimacy come into question. And if a woman gets pregnant out of wedlock? Brace for drama. Her options range from forced marriage to public punishment, though outcomes vary wildly depending on social class and local gossip strength. You can't help but wonder, what if you just didn't care? What if love, not virtue or politics, was enough? You roll the lavender sprig between your fingers. The smell still lingers. It makes you think of smiles in the market, shared pears, and the little laugh that slipped out when you joked about the breeze. Maybe tomorrow you'll accidentally pass by that stall again. Maybe you'll bring 2 pears this time. No promises. Just a hint of possibility. The rest, virginity, dowries, reputation, can wait a day. Because in this moment, in this world of mud and expectation, you're daring to imagine that love might be a little less contractual and a little more human. You wake up the next morning with straw in your hair, a goose nibbling your blanket, and the distinct scent of last night's stew still clinging to your shirt. Romance, as always, begins with livestock and questionable hygiene. But today feels different. You have a plan, or at least the medieval equivalent of a plan, which is mostly just winging it and hoping your crush is in the same place they were yesterday. You grab your best tunic, it's only slightly patched, and tuck the lavender sprig behind your ear. It's a bold move. Not quite a declaration of love, but certainly a strong "hey, I remembered you and didn't die of dysentery overnight." In the dating scene of the Middle Ages, that's basically a love letter. You step outside into the misty morning and head to the marketplace again, heart pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. But as you walk, something strange catches your eye, not a person, but people. Dozens of them. All subtly, but clearly, communicating through clothes, ribbons, and accessories. You realize there's a whole secret language happening here. You've just never noticed it before. Take that girl with the red sleeves. She's not just cold, she's single and very possibly interested. In many towns, sleeve color is more than fashion, it's social signaling. Red might mean availability, green could indicate betrothal, and blue. Blue means devotion, or mourning, or in some cases, leave me alone, I'm just here for cheese. Historians still argue whether these color codes were standardized across regions or just local gossip in fabric form. But there's no doubt, clothing speaks volumes. You pass a group of young men strutting like roosters, their hats pinned at different angles. Turns out, hat tilt is also part of the dating game. A feather on the left side? Flirting. On the right? Already taken. No feather at all? Either married or tragically unfashionable. And then there's the jewelry. A brooch pinned high on the chest might signal purity, worn lower, it could be suggestive. Earrings? Not just decorative, sometimes enchanted, at least according to the town apothecary who swears her aunt warded off a cheating husband with a blessed hoop of tin. You start to wonder what your own clothes are saying. Your tunic has a crooked hem and a mysterious stain shaped like a duck. Probably not sending marriage material the vibes. Still, you puff out your chest and keep walking. There they are. Lavender belt. At the fruit stall again, holding, wait for it, a second pair. Your heart somersaults. But they're not alone. Another suitor is nearby. This one has polished boots, 2 visible teeth, and a tunic so clean you suspect witchcraft. He leans in, says something, and she laughs. You freeze. Is this what heartbreak feels like? Or just indigestion from last night's bread? You decide not to sulk. Instead, you join the conversation casually, asking about pairs. Lavender belt hands you one. Victory. The rival scoffs and walks off, probably to sulk behind the fish cart. Take that, clean boots. Your hand brushes theirs. A jolt. You both look away. In this world, even small gestures are loud. A lingering touch could start rumors faster than a monk at a wine tasting. You try to remember what you've heard about medieval flirting customs. In some regions, young women would drop a handkerchief accidentally for a suitor to pick up. In others, they'd knot their sleeves in a certain way. One particularly bold tradition? Offering a small cake baked with a token inside. If the suitor found it and didn't choke, it meant destiny. There's even an old superstition that if two lovers tied their garments together, like knotting the ends of their belts, it bound their fates. You look at your raggedy belt, then at hers. Maybe not today. A mainstream historical fact here: clothing laws, called sumptuary laws, were in place throughout much of medieval Europe. These laws dictated who could wear what based on class, to prevent peasants from dressing above their station. But when it came to courtship, these rules were often ignored, bent, or hilariously misinterpreted. One shoemaker in Florence was fined for wearing scarlet tights above his status, which he defended as a romantic necessity. The court was unimpressed. His love life, however, flourished. Lavender belt says, "You smell like mint today." You grin. You did, in fact, chew on some wild mint earlier to freshen your breath. Points for effort. You sit together on the low stone wall behind the bakery. The sun is warm, the smell of rising dough drifts around you, and for a moment, the world feels almost modern. Two people. A moment of peace. No screaming infants, no livestock emergencies. Just possibility. You remember a story your aunt told you once, that in the old days, lovers would braid a strand of each other's hair together and hide it in a locket, or even sew it into a sleeve hem. The idea was that the hair bound your spirits. It's likely apocryphal, but the image stuck with you, tender, odd, and somehow magical. You almost ask for a lock of hair, but then remember yours currently resembles a haystack. Maybe another time. The church bell tolls, and your companion stands. Same place tomorrow, they ask. You nod. Your smile says more than your words ever could. As they walk away, you notice they've left something behind, the ribbon. Woven blue silk, with a knot tied in a loop. It's not random. That's a signal. Blue, remember? Devotion. A knot, binding. Your fingers tingle as you hold it. This isn't just a token. It's a message. A quirky tidbit? In 14th century Bohemia, lovers sometimes exchanged messages via embroidery hidden inside hems. One man reportedly wore a tunic that, when flipped inside out, read, "My heart burns only for thee, but the fleas are a close second." Romance and realism, perfectly balanced. As you walk home, you start noticing these signals everywhere. A couple with matching buttons. A boy giving a girl his carved bone comb. A woman adjusting her veil in a slow, meaningful gesture as a merchant passes. Love is everywhere. You've just been blind to the signs. And now you can't unsee them. You wake up with the blue ribbon tucked safely in your sleeve. It tickles your wrist every time you move, a quiet little reminder that someone out there might actually like you. Not for your ox, or your family's goat count, or even your mildewed roof, just for you, with your haystack hair and minty breath and all. You have no idea what to do with this ribbon. Wear it? Frame it? Eat it for luck? Instead, you tie it into a small loop and fasten it to your belt, where it sways with your every step. It's not an engagement, but it's definitely more than a friendly fruit exchange. But let's not get too dreamy. Because the reality of love in medieval life isn't all pears and ribbons. Sometimes it's latrines. Yes. Latrines. See, for all the whispering courtship and embroidered innuendo, sometimes romance sneaks in through the back door, literally. Behind a tavern, beneath a hayloft, or, as you're about to discover, in the least poetic place of all, the communal toilet. You're walking to the well when you hear giggling coming from behind the cookhouse. Naturally, you investigate. What do you find? Two teenagers, clothes askew, flushed faces, exiting the privy hut. They try to pretend they weren't doing anything, but one of them is holding the other's boot. Suspicious. Turns out, privacy is hard to come by when your entire household sleeps in one room, and walls are mostly suggestions. So, couples get creative. Behind the church. In the stables. Under carts. And yes, sometimes in the latrines, because oddly enough, it's one of the few places people tend to leave you alone. Historians still argue whether such encounters were scandalous by community standards or simply accepted as youthful indiscretions. The written records usually show judgment, especially from clergy, but oral tradition suggests a lot more winking and shrugging. You walk on, vaguely horrified but also curious. Could you ever? Probably not. You'd need to bring at least 3 herbal bundles to cover the smell. You pass a cluster of washerwomen along the riverbank. They're gossiping as usual, smacking linens against flat stones, and the topic today? Someone's daughter got caught frolicking near the monastery orchard. There are gasps. Some are scandalized. Others are impressed. One washerwoman cackles, at least she wasn't caught in the pigsty like last year's fool. You're learning quickly, medieval flirtation walks a fine line between charming and deeply unsanitary. Still, there's something thrilling about it. The danger, the secrecy, the absolute absurdity of sneaking kisses next to a pile of turnips. Your own little crush plays in your mind as you walk. You wonder, would they ever meet you behind the herb stall? Would you have the nerve to ask? In a small village or even a city ward, everyone knows everyone else's business. That means any act of affection can become the talk of the town within hours. And gossip, dear listener, spreads faster than the plague. People peer. People whisper. One suspicious glance exchanged during morning bread distribution and suddenly the neighbors are asking if you're getting serious. Romantic pressure mounts, often in the least romantic places. But sometimes, secrecy is the romance. There's a story going around about a couple who only communicated by hiding notes under a loose stone by the well. They met twice a week, at dawn, in the sheep paddock, until one morning, a very territorial ram ended their affair by launching the boy straight into the manure heap. You admire the creativity, if not the ending. A quirky tidbit for you, in certain regions of medieval Germany, young lovers used to carve hearts or initials into wooden spoons and leave them on each other's doorsteps. The more elaborate the carving, the more serious the intent. And yes, if your spoon got returned untouched, it was a gentle way of saying hard pass. You wander toward the church square, where the tavern doors are propped open and the smell of boiled barley wafts out. Even here, flirtation lives. It hides in compliments about ale brewing skills and shoulder rubs offered after a long day's harvest. You've seen barmaids drop extra crumbs of bread for their favorite regulars, and shepherd boys whistle songs they pretend are just for the goats. Even the town priest, who once gave a fiery sermon on the sins of lust, has been spotted chatting a little too long with the miller's widow. Of course, not all meetings behind sheds end in laughter. Sometimes, they result in a child, and then things get complicated. Public shame. Forced marriages. In some towns, the offending couple might be brought before the manorial court. You once saw a boy your age scrubbing the church steps for a week straight, red-faced and furious. His crime? Inappropriate wooing. Still, the danger makes the sweetness sharper. You remember something you once heard from an old blacksmith: the best kiss I ever had was behind the tannery, next to a dead goose. Smelled like rot. Still think about it every spring. Love makes fools of us all. So when you pass by your usual market spot and see Lavender Belt waiting, looking just a little nervous, you decide to be brave. You hold out a figure. Not as romantic as a ribbon, but less likely to stain. They laugh. You sit together again, this time closer. The market buzzes on, unaware of the tiny world forming in your corner. This isn't courtly love. No lute music. No knights jousting. Just two people, dirty from life, sharing snacks and side glances. Your hand brushes theirs again. This time, it stays. You talk about nothing and everything: favorite breads, horrible priests, the pig that chased you last spring. You laugh. You blush. You dare to wonder what tomorrow might feel like if it begins here again. And maybe, just maybe, the most romantic thing isn't flowers or sonnets or even blue ribbons. Maybe it's just this: the way they don't flinch when you accidentally step in something foul, and how they lean in anyway. The next few days unfold like a muddy fairy tale. You meet in little gaps of time, between chores, after errands, when no one's watching too closely. There's still no word like dating in your world, but whatever this is, it's happening. There are no dinner reservations, no love songs blasting from a tavern playlist, just eye contact across a turnip stall and stolen moments behind the tannery. Your romance is stitched together with silence, glances, and the occasional shared pastry. But as you soon discover, nothing kills a budding spark faster than a chaperone. This morning, Lavender Belt arrives not alone but flanked by an older woman with the facial expression of a storm cloud and the gait of someone who hasn't smiled since the last coronation. She's got a tight bun, tighter shoes, and a gossip radar set to maximum. You instinctively straighten your tunic and consider pretending to browse onions. But it's too late. Lavender smiles politely and introduces her: "This is my aunt." Oh no. The aunt? Every eligible person in town has one. Maybe it's an actual aunt, maybe it's a cousin twice removed, or a widowed neighbor with too much time and too few hobbies. Either way, she's there to ensure no sin occurs under her hawk-eyed watch. And by sin, we mean talking, walking, standing within breath distance, or, heaven forbid, touching fingers. The aunt clears her throat before you can speak. "So, you're the pair boy." You blink. You nod. You are indeed the pair boy. The next 30 minutes are a slow-motion parade of awkwardness. You're walking side by side with Lavender, but the aunt is practically between you. You comment on the weather. The aunt snorts. You mention a market song you like. The aunt scoffs. You dare to compliment Lavender's ribbon, and the aunt stares you down so hard you almost forget your name. Historically, chaperones weren't just optional, they were mandatory for anyone with a reputation to protect. Especially young women from decent families. Whether noble or merchant class, having a witness to your every romantic interaction was the only way to ensure purity, or at least the appearance of it. It was part morality enforcement, part social insurance, and yes, part mobile gossip station. Historians still argue whether these ever-present chaperones actually prevented secret romances or just forced everyone to get more creative. Spoiler, it's the latter. You and Lavender try. You really do. You compliment her boots. You joke about the noisy pig in the next stall. You even attempt to include the aunt in the conversation. "Do you like figs?" you ask. She stares at you like you offered her a snake. Eventually, Lavender makes an excuse, something about fetching herbs, and the aunt follows her away like a suspicious shadow. You're left alone among the baskets of fish, sighing deeply. You wander to the fountain, where another pair of young lovers is talking. Except, wait. That girl's mother is 3 steps away pretending to admire a carrot. It's like romantic espionage out here. Still, you find yourself smiling. Because the game changes now. With a chaperone in play, your courtship takes on a new flavor: stealth. You start inventing errands that might put you within proximity of Lavender and her living warning label. Oh, fancy meeting you in the wool-dyeing lane again, you say, for the 3rd day in a row. You learn to speak in code. Instead of "you look beautiful," you say, "blue suits you." Instead of "I think about you every night," you say, "this fig reminds me of the one you gave me." Lavender starts playing along. She leaves small breadcrumbs, an extra nod, a longer glance, once even brushing your hand accidentally as she hands over a basket. And then comes the best moment yet, a tiny rolled scrap of parchment, tucked into a bunch of rosemary she drops near the herb stall. You wait until the coast is clear, snatch it, and open it with trembling fingers. 3 words, written in shaky ink, same place, midnight. You nearly fall into the turnip crate. A quirky tidbit? In some parts of medieval France and Italy, young people actually had official window courting hours, where suitors could speak to young women through their chamber windows, with parents listening behind the curtain, of course. And in rural areas, there were even seasonal courting traditions where boys would sneak into girls' homes to sing songs and offer small tokens. If the girl was interested, she'd answer with a song. If not, she'd throw cold water on his head. Poetic. That night, your heart thuds louder than your boots as you sneak past your snoring siblings, out the door, and into the moonlit alley. The town is quiet, except for the occasional catfight and the distant groan of someone regretting their dinner. She's there, wrapped in a cloak, hair loose for the first time. You exhale slowly. You talk softly. You laugh. You sit shoulder to shoulder on the stone steps of the old bathhouse. It's innocent, and yet more intimate than anything else so far. For the first time, there's no third-party commentary, no aunt making pointed throat noises, no guilt dripping from the steeple above. She leans her head against your shoulder. You think about how much effort it takes to get here, to just sit with someone and be. Between family, church, gossip, and yes, relentless aunts, every moment together is hard won. But maybe that's why it matters so much. A mainstream historical fact, the church's insistence on monitored courtship wasn't just about virtue, it was about legitimacy. A child born from an unblessed union risked being labeled illegitimate, which could jeopardize inheritance rights, trade access, and even guild membership. That's why chaperones mattered, because behind the lace and lemons was a legal system ready to crack down. You and Lavender sit in silence, watching a bat flit across the sky. Tomorrow, she'll be back with the aunt. You'll be back to nods and code words. But for now, in this quiet, forbidden sliver of night, you get something that feels real. You offer her your scarf. She wraps it around her shoulders and gives you a look that makes your stomach do a little medieval dance. This is the good part. The part the sermons don't mention. The flutter in your chest. The weightless feeling when someone chooses you in secret. And when you finally walk back home, stepping carefully past sleeping dogs and sloshing night buckets, you feel like you're glowing. Even if you still smell faintly of cabbage. You wake late and bleary-eyed, having barely caught 4 hours of sleep. But who cares? You're exhausted, grinning, and wearing the same shirt that now smells a little like her, lavender, rosemary, and the slightest trace of wood smoke. You're in love. Or at least, you're somewhere in that ambiguous medieval emotional soup between affection, lust, and a highly inconvenient craving for pears whenever she's around. But now comes your next challenge, putting it into words. See, In your time, there's no texting, no late-night DMs, no tragic playlist curated just to tell someone you miss them. There's one option, and it's handwritten, if you can manage not to smear the ink or accidentally quote a passage from a farming manual. You decide to write her a love letter. Easy, right? Wrong. You sit with a borrowed scrap of parchment, a quill that leaks aggressively, and an ink pot that smells like fermented beet juice. You stare at the blank sheet. You write "Dear" and pause for 20 minutes. Then you blot it out and start again. You eventually produce 5 sentences, one small blot shaped like a questionable goose, and a closing line that says, "May your smile be ever brighter than the moon through fog." You're proud of that one. You might have stolen it from a traveling bard, but you changed a few words, so it's probably original now. A mainstream historical fact, literacy rates were shockingly low in the Middle Ages, especially for commoners. But love letters? Oh, those found a way. In noble circles, letters of courtly love were often dictated to scribes, carefully crafted in poetic Latin or vernacular rhymes. Among the lower classes, lovers sometimes hired clerks to pen messages for them, although one wrong spelling and suddenly your note reads more like a recipe than a romance. You carefully fold the parchment, seal it with wax, after burning your thumb, and plan your delivery. You can't hand it over directly. No, there must be drama. Romance. Secrecy. So you hide it. You tuck the letter into a bread loaf, carving out the soft middle like a squirrel after love and carbs. You wrap it up and stroll casually past the herb stall where Lavender and her aunt are haggling over dried chamomile. You make eye contact. You smile. You slip the loaf onto the table like it's just another carb in the sea. And then you walk away. Mission complete. The next day, she gives you a fig with a note pressed beneath it. Her handwriting is loopy and slightly chaotic, but it says, "I read it 3 times. I spilled tea on the goose part." You've never been prouder. Letters like these are more than paper and ink. They're a form of rebellion. A quiet declaration of "I see you" in a world that prefers you hidden. A quirky tidbit: in 12th century Andalusia, poets wrote in invisible ink using lemon juice, revealing their secret messages only when warmed over a flame. This way, even if intercepted, the love remained invisible, unless your crush accidentally roasted the parchment during dinner prep. You and Lavender begin exchanging letters more often now. Tucked inside baskets, under garden stones, even once in the lining of a cloak. Some are funny. Some are wistful. One simply says, "I dreamed we owned 2 goats and no one else existed." A medieval power couple if there ever was one. One day, she writes, "If we lived in a song, it would have too many verses, but I'd never skip a one." You're smitten. Of course, not every letter in the Middle Ages ends in swooning. Love letters could cause scandal, especially if intercepted. In 1386, a court case recorded a merchant's daughter accused of conspiring to ensnare a nobleman through poetic letters that described her eyes like warm ale and lips like cherry bread. The court deemed the letters unfit for a woman and fined her father. The nobleman? He got promoted. Fair. Historians still argue whether these court cases reflected real moral outrage or just class tension. Either way, the written word had power, romantic, political, and sometimes lethal. One afternoon, you find her waiting at the fountain. No chaperone. No figure. Just her. "I want to show you something," she says. She leads you down an alley, through a small wooden door, and into a cramped, quiet room. There's a candle. A small wooden desk. A single book. "This is my uncle's scriptorium," she says. "He taught me letters when I was small." You blink. You can read. She smirks. I can write, too. In this world, that makes her rare. Especially for a woman. You're suddenly overwhelmed with awe and a little bit of imposter syndrome. She could have corrected every grammar mistake you made. And she still liked you. She shows you a pressed flower inside the book. This is from last summer. The color's faded, but I kept it anyway. You realize this moment, quiet, dusty, lit by candlelight, is more intimate than any moonlit tryst. Because it's hers. A part of her life she's sharing, not just her time. You reach for her hand. I think, you whisper, I'd like to read every letter you ever write. She squeezes your fingers. Then you'll have to keep your handwriting legible. Fair. You walk home that night with a new letter in your pocket and a thought lingering in your mind. Maybe love isn't grand gestures or dashing poetry or risk of excommunication. Maybe it's just writing to someone and knowing they'll read it twice. You're back in the marketplace when it happens, nothing dramatic, just a little brush of her hand against yours in full daylight. It lasts all of 3 seconds. But in the medieval social landscape, 3 seconds of unchaperoned hand-touching is the equivalent of yelling "I'm wildly in love and probably sinful" across a churchyard. You glance around. Did anyone see? Was there a gasp? A hiss? A distant monk clutching his heart? No. Not yet. But you know how this works. In public, even the gentlest flirtation is never truly private. The crowd swirls past you, but you feel 100 invisible eyes. You and Lavender retreat to safer conversation, turnips, weather, the usual, but the weight of that one small gesture lingers. Especially when you realize it didn't go unnoticed. Old Marjorie, who sells goose feathers and moral judgment in equal measure, is squinting at you from her booth. Her mouth twitches like she's about to speak, then she just spits on the ground and mutters something about youth and their loose elbows. Oh. You've just entered the world of public flirtation and private scandal, where the line between affection and offense is blurry, flexible, and often dictated by who's watching. See, medieval romance lived under a microscope. A girl might smile too long at a boy in church and find herself the subject of sermons. A man might offer his cloak to a woman and end up facing a moral inquiry. And don't get started on dancing, that was basically foreplay in public, and the church knew it. Historians still argue whether the church's obsession with controlling affection was about maintaining virtue or simply maintaining control. Either way, sermons warned constantly against the sins of the flesh, and touching, even just touching, could be interpreted as an invitation to sin. Especially if the couple wasn't married. Or betrothed. Or if one of them was standing within 5 paces of a chicken. That last part might be regional. You try to keep things low-key after that. No more hand-brushing. No dreamy stares. You meet Lavender behind the cart with the really loud onions, where the smell alone discourages eavesdropping. But even here, you sense tension. She's worried. Her aunt's been stricter. Someone made a comment. Someone else asked questions. I think my father suspects something, she whispers, fiddling with her belt. He asked if I like pears. You both laugh, but it's a nervous laugh now. This is where it gets complicated. Because affection in public isn't just risky, it's political. It affects how others treat you, how your family is perceived, and even what you're allowed to do. In small towns and tight city wards, one sideways glance can spark a whole week of rumors. A mainstream historical fact, medieval defamation lawsuits often included accusations of unchaste behavior, and these cases made it into town records. One famous example from York involved a woman suing her neighbor for calling her a kiss slipper, a term that roughly translates to someone who slips around kissing. She won the case, and her neighbor was fined 2 chickens. Justice was poultry-based. Lavender's worried, and honestly, so are you. So, like any well-meaning, slightly overconfident young person in love, you try to fix it. Your plan: make the relationship seem less suspicious by making it more visible. You start greeting her aunt more warmly, tipping your hat, which you barely own, and commenting on the weather. You carry baskets. You talk to her father in the square. You help her family's neighbor chase a runaway goose. You're becoming part of the scenery, blending in with her daily life. It almost works. For a few days, the whispers die down. No one's looking too closely. You still trade notes. Still steal glances. Still dream. But then someone sees you pass a flower to her during prayer. Just a little wild daisy, tucked beside her cloak. And suddenly, the tide turns. You overhear it at the well first. Did you hear? He touched her hand in church. At the altar? No, near the back. But still. I heard he gave her a kiss on the cheek. I heard he's planning to elope. Eloping? With her and her aunt's goose. That last part is probably a joke. Probably. Soon, your name and hers are tangled together in every conversation. Mothers glance at you with disapproval. Fathers grip their belts a little tighter. Even the village dog starts barking at you more than usual. Lavender finds you that evening behind the bakehouse. She looks tired. They say I'm reckless, she murmurs. That I'll ruin my future. You want to protest. You want to say love is worth it. That they're wrong. But you both know the truth. In this world, even a whisper of impropriety can shut doors. Especially for women. Especially when their families see marriage as strategy, not sentiment. A quirky tidbit: in 15th century Florence, public shame wasn't just verbal, it was theatrical. Accused lovers might be forced to parade through the streets wearing ridiculous outfits, donkey ears, wooden signs, even a fake baby strapped to their chest to symbolize sinful consequences. The crowd would throw vegetables. Or worse, bread crusts. The horror. You promise Lavender you'll be careful. No more risky gifts. No more notes hidden in fruit. You'll keep things quiet. But as you walk home through the muddy alleyways, you feel something shift. This isn't just fun anymore. It's fragile. Precious. Under threat. You pass a couple walking the opposite direction, clearly married, barely speaking. He's carrying a sack of grain. She looks exhausted. There's no magic between them, just a sense of shared burden. You realize how rare it is to feel what you feel. How special. And how unfair it is that it has to be hidden. So you do something a little reckless. You grab a piece of parchment. You write the words you've been scared to say. You seal the note in wax and slip it into her basket when no one's watching. It says, "I would rather be whispered about with you than celebrated without you." You don't know if it's wise. But it's honest. The next time you see her, it's raining. Not a soft, romantic drizzle either. This is full body, boot-soaking, mud-in-your-teeth medieval rain. The kind that turns roads into rivers and roofs into sieves. But even in the downpour, there she is, hood half up, dress soaked halfway to her knees, and smiling like she did read your note, and liked it. You help her carry firewood across the square, each of you slipping and laughing and pretending not to notice how close your fingers get when you both reach for the same log. It's all very innocent on the outside, two young people enduring foul weather, but beneath it, sparks. The rain keeps everyone indoors, which means fewer prying eyes. For once, you're not being judged for existing near someone you clearly adore. You even catch her aunt yawning by the window, too sleepy to monitor every blink you share. You walk her back to her doorway, soaked to the bone, and she turns before stepping inside. "Meet me at the Weaver's Bridge," she says, barely louder than the rain. "Tonight." You nod, heart hammering like a festival drum. Later that evening, long after the rain stops and the town begins to snore, you slip out, squelch your way through mud, and find her already there, waiting by the bridge that stretches over the shallow, murmuring stream. She pulls you under the eaves of a shed and speaks quickly, scanning the darkness. "We don't have much time." You're expecting another secret rendezvous, another laugh, maybe even a kiss if the moon's in your favor. Instead, she says, "My father's planning a match. He's negotiating with a tanner's son." You freeze. Your stomach turns. You barely know the boy, but his boots are always polished, and he once owned a real feather quill. "He's from the next village over," she says. "But he has sheep. And land." You swallow. "What about us?" She hesitates. He doesn't smile when he speaks. He smells like fish glue. "I don't want him." "But your father." She sighs. Says love comes after. Or doesn't come at all. You stand in silence, cold creeping through your wet sleeves. You thought time together, figs, letters, that brush of hands, meant something permanent. But this is the Middle Ages, and love is rarely left to the lovers. Especially across class lines. Because here's the hard truth, Lavender's family has more than yours. Not much more, just enough to be seen as above your muddy boots and patchwork tunic. And social climbing doesn't happen often. When it does, it's usually through cunning marriages, not dashing romance. You remember the tale of a baron's daughter who fell in love with a stable boy. A beautiful story, until her father found out and had the boy relocated to a distant monastery. Not executed, of course. Just reproposed. Like old linen. Historians still argue whether such class-crossing romances were more common than records suggest, or if they were mostly poetic inventions passed down to entertain and warn. What's clear is that when they happened, the consequences were real and rarely happy. You look at her now, hands clenched, eyes defiant. "Do you want to marry him?" "No," she says. But that doesn't always matter. You understand. Love stories in this world are often like bread, beautiful when warm and fresh, but quick to mold if left out too long. And yet, some lovers do resist. You've heard whispers of it. The scullery maid who vanished with the miller's apprentice. The knight who married his laundress and built her a home far from his estate. Scandalous. Rare. But real. A quirky tidbit. In some villages, runaway couples could invoke a custom called handfasting, an unofficial ceremony where two people simply joined hands before witnesses and declared themselves married. It wasn't always legally binding, but it could be hard to undo, especially if a child came of it. In Scotland, it even evolved into a one-year trial marriage. Romantic and mildly terrifying. You want to say you'll run away. That you'll escape. Build a cottage in the woods, raise goats, and write each other letters every night by firelight. But you also know neither of you has the means. You've got no land, no trade of your own yet, and worse, you've got parents. Maybe he'll back out, you say weakly. Maybe he'll get smallpox. She snorts, then covers her mouth, scandalized by her own joke. That's awful. But a little funny. You smile, and even though the moment is slipping away, you both laugh like the fools you are. She kisses you then, quick, soft, terrified. And then she's gone, darting through the shadows, back to her bed, her family, her future. You stand there, staring at the place she vanished, water dripping from your sleeves. The kiss burns on your lips, and not in a poetic way. You're pretty sure she had pepper on her bread earlier. You walk home slowly. The rain has picked up again, soft but steady. Your tunic sticks to your skin. You barely feel it. A mainstream historical fact, arranged marriages weren't limited to the nobility. Even among peasants, family-arranged unions were common, often negotiated with more precision than trade deals. A daughter's marriage could bring another ox, consolidate 2 fields, or solve a feud. Love was not just impractical, it was an economic distraction. But something about you refuses to let go. Not yet. Maybe you can find a way. A letter to her father? A proposal backed by something real? A bold gesture? You fall asleep that night with hope and dread fighting for space in your chest. The world may not care about your love story, but you do. And you're not done writing it yet. You wake to church bells and heartache. The bells, you can ignore, just the usual clang announcing midday mass, or possibly someone's ox escaping again. But the ache? That's new. That's the slow, heavy pressure in your chest as you replay Lavender's words. A match is being arranged. You try to shake it off. Eat a piece of bread. Feed the chickens. Pretend everything's normal. But nothing is normal now. Because love, your silly, sweet, mud-stained kind of love, might be ending, not with a dramatic sword fight or plague, but with a father shaking hands over a goat dowry. You've got no title. No land. No family connections worth bragging about. So what can you offer? Just your heart. Which, unfortunately, holds no monetary value. Unless you could offer something else. Not coins. Not sheep. But words. Poetry. You've heard of it before, courtly love they call it. A tradition among nobles and knights, where men write verses for unattainable women. The love is always noble, pure, and usually completely doomed. You know you're no noble. You don't own a sword. You don't ride a horse, unless being kicked by one counts. But you do have feelings. And a quill. And slightly better than average handwriting when you're not too nervous. You decide, if you can't fight for her hand, maybe you can write for it. Now, before you get too starry-eyed, let's break this down. Courtly love, as it flourished from the 12th century onward, was a kind of emotional performance art. A knight swears loyalty to a lady, usually married and higher-ranking, whom he praises endlessly, from the color of her eyes to the delicate curve of her elbow. The love is meant to be non-physical, though let's just say that rule was flexible depending on the thickness of the nearest curtain. Historians still argue whether courtly love reflected real relationships or was just a literary ideal, kind of a medieval role-play of romance with bonus feudal baggage. You've read some of the poems. They're passionate, dramatic, and sometimes hilariously over the top. One knight once compared his lady's voice to swansong over silver rain and her ankles to pillars of polished pearl. You've seen her ankles. Lovely, yes, but pillars might be pushing it. Still, you try. You write a poem. It rhymes, eventually. It's mostly about her laugh, her hair, and the way her ribbon fluttered that one windy day like it had feelings of its own. You include a line about goats because, well, this is your life. Then you copy it carefully onto fresh parchment and wonder how in the world to get it to her without her father intercepting and mistaking it for a tax notice. You decide to slip it through the shutters of her house late at night. Risky. Romantic. Possibly stupid. It lands perfectly. The next day, she passes you at the well and drops a small folded note into your hand without a word. You open it behind the alehouse. One line, "Your words made me cry and laugh, both at once." You grin so hard you nearly swallow your tongue. She writes back that night. Her poem is short, unpolished, but beautiful. It begins with, "You see me when others only glance." And now you're no longer just in love, you're in a literary relationship. You trade poems. Not every day, too dangerous. But enough to build a world no one else sees. You learn new metaphors. You compare her hair to wheat fields in autumn. She compares your voice to bread crust when it breaks, oddly specific, strangely flattering. A quirky tidbit, in medieval Andalusia, poets of love sometimes used fruit metaphors to disguise their intent. An orange grove could stand for a woman's beauty, a bitter almond for rejection. You briefly consider using similar codes, but decide that your poetic skill isn't ready for orange grove level subtlety. Lavender starts wearing your poem, tucked inside her sleeve, folded like a secret shield. You start waking up with lines of verse stuck in your head. And then, one evening, something shifts. You're walking by the chapel when you see her, speaking with the tanner's son. He's taller than you. Cleaner. He's holding something, an actual gift. Looks like an embroidered handkerchief. Probably commissioned. You're suddenly aware that your most expensive possession is still that goose-shaped ink blot from your first love letter. But here's what gets you, she doesn't smile the way she does with you. Her face is polite, distant, wrapped in the mask all women wear when they're told to behave. You understand then. Courtly love may be built on longing, but you're living in it now. Loving someone who may never be yours in the way you want. Who may always exist in secret stanzas and behind drawn curtains. But you also remember something else, courtly love isn't passive. It's full of action, quests, challenges, risks. So, you decide it's time for your own small quest. You write your boldest poem yet. No metaphors. No fruit. Just truth. If I cannot walk beside you, I will walk near. If I cannot hold your hand, I will carry your name in every step. If I cannot kiss you in sunlight, I will dream of it until the stars burn out. You don't send it. Not yet. You tuck it inside your tunic. Close to your heart. Like a promise. Because this love may not be practical, but it's real. And whether you wear armor or smell faintly of garlic and rain, that still counts for something. You're in the middle of hauling a basket of wilted carrots when the news hits, a marriage contract is being drafted. Not whispered. Not rumored. This is official. Lavender. And the tanner's son. Your knees almost buckle under the weight of the basket, or maybe it's just your soul trying to exit your body through your boots. It's happening. The thing everyone feared, well, you feared, but no one could stop. An arranged marriage. Signed. Sealed. Practically dripping in goat dowry already. You drag your feet to the market square, numb. She's there. You can't tell if she's seen you yet. Her hands are folded. Her face is unreadable. Like someone's tucked her real expression behind her eyes, far out of reach. Her aunt spots you and frowns. You retreat behind a sausage cart. This is it. This is the charm of arranged marriages, charm here meaning utter lack of say in one's emotional destiny. A mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe, arranged marriages weren't just common, they were expected. Love was considered a dangerous foundation for marriage. Unreliable. Volatile. Like building a house out of cheese. Instead, marriage was about alliances, wealth, land, or solving awkward social problems. She's got no heirs, you've got too many cousins, let's fix this. Lavender's family isn't noble, but they're respectable. A little land, a couple of wool looms, and enough pride to insist she marries well. The tanner's son? He's clean, owns boots, and probably can count past 20. A parent's dream. Yours, clearly, is not. You find her later that evening in the alley by the dye pots, where the scent of boiled madder root overwhelms everything else, including your panic. You heard, she asks softly. You nod. I didn't say yes, she says quickly. I didn't say no either. You want to ask why she hasn't refused. But you know why. It's not her choice to make. I'll be 17 this winter, she says. Old enough for marriage. Or so they say. In some villages, that's even late. Girls are often married off by 14 or 15, especially if their families are ambitious or nervous. Boys marry later, often only when they inherit land or take up a trade. Love, as you've come to accept, fits somewhere in the margins. She reaches into her sleeve and pulls out your last poem. Folded. A little wrinkled. I read this every morning. You lean against the wall beside her, words caught in your throat. You want to scream, let's run away. Let's go live in the woods and eat turnips forever. But even in your own head that sounds tragic. Will you go through with it, you finally ask. I don't know. She tucks the poem back inside her sleeve like armor. It depends what he offers. My father says the tanner has a cousin on the guild council. That's all it takes. One useful connection, and your shared fig-laced fairy tale evaporates into parchment dust. A quirky tidbit, in some medieval regions, suitors could present their offer for a bride using a formal contract written on parchment, complete with signatures, witnesses, and dowry terms. A particularly fancy one from 14th century Italy included a line promising at least 5 goats and 1 blanket of good wool. Truly, nothing says eternal love like livestock and proper insulation. You and Lavender walk slowly. Neither of you say much. At one point, she slips her hand into yours. No one's around. No aunt. No priest. Just a tired sky and a few squawking geese. Let's pretend this is a courtship walk, she whispers. Like nobles have. Strolling through the gardens, supervised by a wet nurse and a harpist. You nod solemnly. I'll be the harpist. She giggles. And for a second, it's easy to believe you're living in one of those courtly romances. You, the daring squire. She, the clever noble girl, testing the limits of fate. But reality is more drafty. You know what happens next. Contracts lead to engagements. Engagements to blessings. Blessings to veils and vows, and a priest saying something about obeying your husband while goats bleat in the distance. So what's left? Desperation. You hatch a plan. Not the runaway sort, yet, but something bolder. You'll visit her father. Not unannounced, you're not that reckless, but maybe under the guise of offering your family's extra firewood. You'll say you want to speak. Show you're serious. Maybe even propose something. You are, after all, not entirely worthless. You've got your health. 2 strong arms. A half-decent singing voice. A vague promise from your uncle that you'll inherit the chicken coop when he dies. That's got to be worth at least 1 goat. The idea sounds brave until you're standing at her door. Lavender answers. She freezes. You're here. I came to talk to your father. She doesn't stop you. But she doesn't smile, either. You're led inside. Her father is at the table, sorting dried herbs. He looks up. Boy, he says. He knows your name. He's just letting you know it doesn't matter. You clear your throat. Sir, I'd like to make an appeal. He raises an eyebrow. Appeal? You press forward. I know you're speaking to the tanner's son. And I know he has land. And money. And a fine tunic. Lavender winces. But I care for your daughter. Truly. I would work. Save. Build something, even if it's small. If she'd have me, I would marry her. He leans back in his chair. You have nothing. I have enough. His gaze hardens. Love doesn't fill bellies. Or fix roofs. No, you say quietly. But it stays when the roof leaks. He says nothing for a long time. Eventually, he waves you off. We'll speak again. Maybe. You leave shaking. You don't know if you won or lost. Maybe neither. But when you see Lavender later, her eyes are different. Not surprised. Not hopeful. Just afraid. And you realize, sometimes, love isn't blocked by rules or rivals or goats. Sometimes, it's the people you love most who hold the key and refuse to turn it. You lie awake in your hay-stuffed blanket that night, staring at the rafters. A spider dangles above your nose, but even it can't distract you from the spinning thoughts, the contract, the tanner's smug grin, her father's silence, and the look in Lavender's eyes that said everything was slowly crumbling. You need help. Not just hope. And certainly not just poetry. You need something medievally ridiculous. So the next morning, you go looking for magic. No, not dragon summoning, fireball hurling, help I've turned into a frog kind of magic. You need love magic, that murky, whispered world of curses, charms, and lust potions, passed down behind doors, muttered at fire pits, and sold in carefully folded bundles by people whose eyebrows move independently of their foreheads. The village wise woman is your first stop. Her name is Agatha. She smells like moss and despair and owns 15 cats, at least 3 of which wear bells. You find her sitting behind her hut, grinding something that may once have been a mushroom. You clear your throat. I need help with matters of the heart. She grins, revealing only 2 teeth, strategically spaced, like architectural ruins. Finally come for the frog's tongue, have you? You blink. That's a thing. Oh yes. Dried frog tongue. Place it in your shoe. If the girl walks toward you first, it's love. If she walks away, you might need a stronger potion. You're not entirely convinced, but you nod. She rummages around, muttering, until she finds a pouch and hands it over. Also included, she says, are dried rose petals, beetle shells, and a lock of hair from someone named Bertrand. Don't ask. You give her 2 silver pennies and half a loaf of honey bread. Possibly an overpayment. Possibly a down payment on the universe's favor. Historians still argue whether medieval love magic was truly believed or simply tolerated as a psychological placebo. The church officially condemned it, lumping it in with heresy and witchcraft. But unofficially? Everyone knew someone who'd tried it, especially when their romantic situation got desperate. You take the pouch home. Open it. Gag slightly. There's definitely something in there that was once alive and is now aggressively not. Still, you follow the instructions, Sprinkle the rose petals under your bed. Sleep with the beetle shell in your left shoe. Recite the charm backwards on a waning moon. You also write lavender another note, this one folded around a dried violet, and the inscription, "Not even frog tongues can keep me from you." You hope she laughs. The next day, she walks past you in the square and winks. Success? Coincidence? Herbal hallucination? Doesn't matter. You're back in the game. That night, you meet behind the chapel wall. The bell tower casts long shadows, and you both lean into the gloom, safe from auntly eyes and tannily smugness. "I've been thinking," she whispers, "about alternatives." You freeze. Like not marrying him. Like running away. Your heart drops into your boots. And then it soars. You mean it. She nods, though it's shaky. "I have a cousin in the next town. She keeps bees. They say she lives alone." You'd want to live there? With bees? If it meant I didn't have to marry someone I don't choose. Yes. You suddenly love bees. You talk through the night, hatching plans, whispering routes, estimating how much food you could carry. You know it's risky. If you're caught, there could be real consequences. Families might disown you. Villagers could jeer. The church could excommunicate you, or worse, sentence you to separate lives filled with public shame and bad cheese rations. But what's the alternative? Watching her marry someone else? Becoming a cautionary tale? Growing old knowing your one great love story ended because you were too polite to fight for it? No. You're not letting that happen. You agree to wait 2 days. Enough time for her to gather her things, enough time for you to find someone willing to lend you a cart or at least a decent pair of boots. In the meantime, you carry Agatha's pouch like it's sacred. You don't know if frog tongues really work, but at this point, you're not taking any chances. A quirky tidbit, in parts of Eastern Europe, it was believed you could win a lover's affection by baking a piece of your fingernail into their bread. Not that you're considering that. Probably. Maybe. Instead, you stick to the more palatable rituals. You leave a dried sprig of thyme in her satchel. In old lore, thyme symbolizes courage. You hope it works. The day before your planned departure, she hands you a final note, disguised inside a folded handkerchief. "Meet me where the river bends. Midnight. Wear the blue ribbon." You nod. You press her hand once, quick and gentle. You turn away, heart pounding with every step. You don't know what tomorrow will bring, only that you've got a frog tongue in your shoe, a girl who winked, and a plan that might justify the very system designed to keep hearts apart. And for the first time in days, you let yourself believe. This story might have an ending you write together. You spend the entire next day preparing. Not preparing like a knight with armor and a valiant horse, more like a nervous peasant with a patched satchel and a half-eaten wheel of cheese. Still, you pack what you can: bread, apples, a tin of leftover lard, your best cloak, and the blue ribbon she asked you to wear. You even tuck in a spare pair of socks. Because romance is many things, but cold, wet feet are not one of them. Tonight's the night. Midnight. The river bend. You tell yourself you're ready, until you catch sight of yourself in the reflection of a bucket. You look like someone who's just crawled out of a grain sack. Your hair? Exploded haystack. Your breath? Probably an insult to lavender. Your face? More please don't arrest me than run away with me forever. So, you get to work. And here we begin one of the more tragic, occasionally hilarious chapters in medieval love, hygiene, halitosis, and hot waxing. Let's just say, people tried. A mainstream historical fact, most medieval people bathed far more often than the myths claim. In towns and cities, public bathhouses were common, often segregated by sex or not. A few even served food and wine. Cleanliness wasn't considered sinful until certain church authorities decided nudity led to impure thoughts. From then on, the frequency of bathing depended on how devout your town was and how close you lived to a barrel of rainwater. You're doing a home spa. First, you scrub your hands and face with a linen rag dipped in warm water and crushed mint leaves. You find some parsley to chew for breath. Your teeth aren't great, but you take pride in the fact that they're still mostly attached. Then comes your hair. You run a bone comb through it until it stops resisting. You rub in a paste made of egg whites and a little ash. Folk wisdom says it adds shine. It mostly adds regret. And then, because you heard somewhere that nobles waxed themselves smooth, you attempt the unthinkable. You heat a small chunk of beeswax. Carefully. Lovingly. Terrifyingly. You apply it to your jawline. Wait. Breathe. And pull. You do not scream. You whimper heroically. Half a beard gone. The other half now frozen in fear. You leave the rest. You're going for a courageous but only partially singed look. Still, it works. You smell acceptable. You're glowing in a raw turnip kind of way. And you're ready. Historians still argue whether medieval grooming was motivated by health, social rank, or seduction. Probably a mix of all three. We know nobles carried scented cloths to press against their noses in crowded streets, wore sachets of rosemary and cloves, and even rinsed their mouths with wine. Which, honestly, you've also done, mostly by drinking it. But grooming wasn't just for nobles. Peasants used local herbs, like lavender, mint, and chamomile. They scraped dirt from under nails, soaked feet in warm water, and even plucked body hair with tweezers made from bone or metal. Painful? Absolutely. But have you ever tried to flirt with a splintery eyebrow? A quirky tidbit, in some parts of medieval Europe, women would rub their faces with warm animal fat mixed with crushed daisies. It was believed to bring a rosy glow and attract affection. You try something similar with bacon grease. It's a choice. Dressed in your best tunic, which doesn't smell like goats for once, the blue ribbon tied at your collar, and your frog tongue charm still tucked in your boot, you head for the river. It's quiet. The moon is half hidden by clouds. The world feels paused. And then, there she is. Cloaked, breath misting in the cold, hair pulled back in a simple braid. No ribbons. No lace. Just her. You look, she starts. You too, you say quickly. Neither of you finishes the sentence. You don't need to. You stand together at the water's edge, listening to the current. It's not rushing. Just humming. She shows you her satchel. Inside, 2 linen wraps of food, a pair of worn shoes, and a small carved figurine, something her grandmother gave her when she was small. A reminder of home, she says. Just in case this works. That just in case hits you hard. This isn't a game. You take her hand. She squeezes yours. Then, out of nowhere, she gasps. Someone's coming. You duck behind the nearest shrub, trying not to curse your squeaky boots. A lantern flickers on the path. A man's voice murmurs. Another figure follows, 2 townsfolk. Lovers? Or worse, her father? You hold your breath. They pass. just a traveler and his donkey. You both exhale in unison. This is ridiculous, she says, but she's smiling. Running around like thieves. For what? So we can spend the rest of our lives milking goats and fighting fleas. Yes, you say. With you? Yes. She looks at you for a long time. Then, slowly, she leans in. A kiss. Soft. Real. No frogs. No priests. Just two people choosing each other. When she pulls away, her voice is barely a whisper, then lets go. You walk along the river path, hearts pounding. Not from fear. Not entirely. You're sweaty, awkward, and may or may not have lard on your chin. But none of that matters now. Because tonight, beneath a low sky and with questionable breath, you are cleaner than you've ever been. You are ready. The road curves away from town like a ribbon unraveling under moonlight. You and Lavender stick close to the edges, where overgrown hedges offer a little cover, and the occasional bramble to the face. Your boots squelch in mud, your breath mists in front of you, and somewhere off in the woods, an owl keeps hooting like it knows exactly what you're doing and disapproves. It should be romantic. It almost is. Until you hear the barking. You freeze. She grabs your arm. The barking grows louder, closer, followed by the unmistakable sound of angry voices. Not wolves. Worse. Family. It seems someone's noticed you're missing. You duck behind a low wall, hearts hammering. A lantern beam swings across the path. A man shouts your name, then hers. There's fear in the voice, but also something else, fury. We can't go this way, she hisses. Too exposed. You nod, pointing toward the hill beyond the orchard. That trail leads toward the mill. If we cut through, we can reach the bridge faster. You run. Not gracefully. More like a couple of startled pigs in damp linen. Your satchel bangs against your side. Her cloak catches on a bush. You rip it free. She's laughing now, nervous, breathless, exhilarated. You always were the worst at sneaking. You grin. I got us this far. To a bush and a thorn in my arm. Romance. She snorts. You reach the bridge. Pause. Listen. Silence. For now. But you both know this won't last. In a world that watches so closely, running away is more than just physical distance, it's defiance. And defiance has consequences. You keep moving. Still, that moment lingers. The sound of angry voices, the flash of the lantern, a warning. Because when romance doesn't play by the rules, punishment is swift, public, and often extremely damp. Take what happened to Agnes Barker, the baker's daughter, just 2 years ago. Caught in a barn with the miller's apprentice. Both unmarried. No contract. No chaperone. The whole village whispered about it for days. But the whispers weren't the worst part. The ducking stool was. A mainstream historical fact. In many medieval towns, unmarried women accused of sexual misconduct were punished publicly, often with a ritual humiliation known as ducking. They were strapped to a stool and dunked repeatedly in a pond or river while villagers watched and jeered. Sometimes it was meant to cleanse them. Sometimes it was just to shame them. Either way, it worked, people remembered. Men weren't always spared either. If caught in scandal, they might be tied to a post with a sign reading Gletschauer or forced to wear an outfit made of torn linen and bells. You tell Lavender all this as you climb the trail, and she stops short. They put bells on them. You nod. jingled with every step. She bursts into laughter. Maybe we should just go back and ask for the bells. It sounds more festive than fleeing. But she doesn't mean it. Because both of you know what would happen if you were caught now. You aren't noble. You don't have enough land to bribe your way out. You have each other. And a satchel full of bread and desperation. A quirky tidbit, in parts of 13th century England, jealous rivals could bring love complaints before local courts. One man successfully sued another for enticing away his betrothed with promises of better cheese and newer shoes. The defendant was fined a small sum and forced to return the cheese. You keep climbing. The moon slips behind clouds, plunging the trail into grey. Do you think your father would forgive you? You asked quietly. Lavender exhales slowly. Eventually. Maybe. But not this year. Maybe not even this decade. You reach the top of the ridge. Down below, the river valley, the far trail, and beyond that, the bee cousin's cottage. If she's still there. If she still remembers. If. You both sit. Rest. The world is quiet again, save for your breathing and the rustle of your cloak. She leans her head on your shoulder. You know, she says, there was a time I thought I'd never get to choose anything. You chose me, you say. I did. She smiles. Poor decision. But I stand by it. You both sit in silence for a while longer, the wind tugging at your sleeves. And then you hear it, faint but unmistakable. Shouting. Below. They're still looking. I don't want to go back, she says. Even if they promise no punishment. Even if they say I can stay. You nod. Because you'll still be watched. Exactly. Like I'm a story someone else is writing. You reach into your satchel. Pull out a folded scrap of parchment, the one with the poem you never sent. The one that ends with, if I cannot kiss you in sunlight, I will dream of it until the stars burn out. You hand it to her. She reads it slowly. And then she kisses you. Not out of fear or timing or hiding. Just because. And then, hooves. Real ones this time. You scramble to your feet. Riders on the path below. Torches flickering. We have to move. No, she says suddenly. We can't keep running like this. You blink. But we go forward. Openly. Let them see. No more hiding. She steps to the edge of the ridge. Pulls her hood back. Raises a hand. The riders stop. There's a pause. Long tense. Then one rider dismounts. Her father. Lavender doesn't move. She looks tiny up there, wrapped in moonlight, facing everything that once decided her future without asking. You step beside her. I'm not sorry, she calls down. And the words hang there, clear, unshakable. I chose this, she adds. And I'd choose it again. Her father looks up, face unreadable. And says nothing. Not a word. Not yet. But he doesn't shout. He doesn't grab her. He just stands there. Listening. And for the first time, maybe that's enough. You don't sleep that night. Neither does she. You stay just beyond the ridge, tucked into the crook of an old yew tree. The riders retreat long before sunrise, hooves fading into the dark like a distant drum roll that never quite reaches its crescendo. Her father didn't speak. Not a blessing, not a curse. Just silence. Which, in this world, is its own kind of answer. In the morning, you wake with dew clinging to your sleeves and a piece of bark stuck to your cheek. Lavender's already up, warming her hands over a small fire. Her eyes are puffy, but she's smiling faintly. "No bells yet," she says. "Still time," you reply, rubbing your face. But the air's different now. Something has shifted. It's not just fear anymore. It's intention. You're no longer just sneaking glances behind alehouses or passing love notes wrapped in fruit. You've stepped into a new world, a world of tawny tokens and underwear gifts. That's right. You've reached the strange but true medieval stage of official courtship gifts. And it starts, quite naturally, with underpants. Not your underpants. Hers. Sort of. See, in noble circles, knights carried a token of their lady's affection into battle or tournament. Sometimes it was a glove. Sometimes a ribbon. And sometimes, it was a piece of her unmentionables. A stocking. A garter. A carefully folded bit of linen that may or may not have ever seen a hip. These tokens were tied to lances, pinned to armor, or tucked inside helmets like love-powered force fields. A mainstream historical fact, during the age of chivalry, it became fashionable for ladies to bestow favors upon their chosen knights. These were usually symbolic, but occasionally scandalous. There's one poem from Burgundy that mentions a knight receiving a delicate veil, perfumed and slightly torn, which definitely doesn't sound like it was from the laundry line. You don't own a lance. And you've never jousted in your life, unless you count that one time you tripped over a goose and landed face first in a fence post. But you do want a token. So when Lavender reaches into her satchel and hands you something wrapped in cloth, your heart somersaults. Inside? A piece of embroidered linen. Just a small square with a stitched blue ribbon on one corner. It was the edge of a sleeve, she says. From when I was little. It's beautiful, you whisper, holding it like it's made of crystal. It's sentimental, she shrugs. And probably still smells like basil. She pulls something from her other pocket and adds, "Also, I brought this." You stare at it. A pair of tiny, poorly stitched drawers. "Don't worry," she laughs, cheeks pink. "They're from my cousin's doll. Not real underpants. But I figured if we're doing courtly love, we might as well do it properly." You grin so hard your face hurts. "You want a token," she says. "I've got tokens." You're still laughing when you hear voices nearby, this time friendly ones. It's the beekeeper cousin. Turns out she's real. Still lives on the edge of the next village, surrounded by hives and overgrown lavender bushes. Her cottage smells like smoke and honey and something slightly fermented. She takes one look at you both and sighs. Let me guess. Family drama. Elopement. Possibly a ducking threat? You nod sheepishly. She waves you in. Come inside before someone sees and writes a ballad about it. You settle in for the afternoon. She lends you clean tunics. Warms water for washing. Offers fresh bread and even fresher gossip. You're lucky, she says, pointing a wooden spoon at Lavender. Your father didn't drag you by the braid. Mine threatened to sell me to a merchant who smelled like boiled leeks. I told him I'd rather marry a chicken. That ended the discussion. You're starting to think this cousin is your new favorite person. Over the next few days, you lay low. Help with chores. Write more poems. She starts braiding a bit of blue thread into her hair. You carve a small wooden heart and hang it around your neck. You're not sure what the future holds, but you're building little rituals. Like soldiers tying charms to their armor. or peasants giving embroidered underwear to prove a point. A quirky tidbit: in parts of 14th century Wales, lovers carved their names into spoons, actual wooden spoons, and exchanged them as courtship gifts. A well-decorated spoon could mean serious intentions. A plain one? Casual flotation. You start eyeing the kitchen ladles suspiciously. You decide to make your own spoon. It's terrible. Lopsided. One end looks like a shoe. But when you give it to her, she holds it like treasure. "You carved this for me," she says. More like, attempted. She kisses your cheek. It's perfect. One evening, as the bees settle and the sun turns the sky to warm apricot, Lavender sits beside you on the cottage step. "They might not come for us," she says. "But they might." You nod. "Whatever happens," you reply, "I want to face it with you." She takes your hand. You feel the ribbon between your fingers. This love isn't secret anymore. It's not just passed through fruit baskets or written in shaky verse. Now, it's stitched. Gifted. Carved in spoons and worn like armor. And as the bees hum softly nearby and the stars flicker into view, you both know. Whatever comes next, this is yours. You've just finished helping Lavender's cousin harvest honeycomb and getting stung in places that will not be named when she turns to you and says, "You need to loosen up." You blink, still nursing your swollen wrist. Loosen up. You're walking around like someone's going to arrest you for smiling. I mean, they might. She smirks. Come on. There's an alehouse in the village. Very few morals, very good cider. Tonight, we're going. You're reluctant at first. After all, you've just eloped in the most non-noble way possible, and your idea of wild fun until now has involved scribbling poetry and awkward spoon carving. But when Lavender nods her agreement, and you see the tired curve in her smile, you realize she needs this too. And so, under a moon that seems to encourage questionable decisions, you wash the bee-sting smell off your arms, comb your hair back, and set off down the road. Welcome, friend, to the beautiful chaos of peasant pickup lines and alehouse nights. This isn't a tavern filled with lute music and whispering nobles. No velvet cushions. No goblets of aged wine. This is a dirt-floored, low-ceilinged room with smoke-stained beams, sticky tables, and a three-legged dog that might also be the night's entertainment. And you feel immediately at home. You get 2 cups of something called applewhip that tastes like fermented joy and maybe turnip. The cousin immediately disappears into a group of locals playing dice. Lavender and you settle onto a bench near the hearth. You're shoulder to shoulder, warm, and for the first time in days, not whispering in fear. The place is alive with flirting, very loud, very unsubtle flirting. A man at the bar yells across the room to a girl near the door, "Your ankles look as strong as your ox." She beams. A woman with a face like boiled leather leans across the table and says to the man beside her, "You smell like onions and ambition." He blushes. Another pair exchanges jokes in dialect so thick you only catch every third word, but it's clear they're wooing with all the grace of drunk pigeons, and succeeding. A mainstream historical fact: in medieval villages, alehouses were central to social and romantic life, especially among peasants. These weren't fancy inns, just someone's house with barrels of ale and room for company. They were where gossip spread, dances broke out, and relationships began. You could meet your future spouse while sharing a bench and a lukewarm mug of mead. Or get punched for complimenting the wrong person's cabbage. And oh yes, dancing. It starts with a bang, someone slaps a hand drum. Then feet stomp. A pipe joins in. Within minutes, people are forming a circle, clapping, whirling. Lavender grins at you. Do you dance? She asks. I trip artistically, you reply. But you take her hand anyway. You join the others, hopping over someone's discarded cloak, spinning under a low beam that nearly knocks your teeth out, and somehow keeping up as the rhythm picks up. You catch glimpses of flour-dusted hands, flushed cheeks, and one man who's clearly inventing steps as he goes. And then the world narrows. It's just her. Her laugh. Her hand in yours. The flicker of firelight across her face. The way she leans in close when you twirl, and the way she doesn't let go even when the music pauses. It's not elegant. It's not choreographed. But it's yours. A quirky tidbit: in some medieval alehouses, people used coded toasts to flirt. One known phrase from Devonshire was, "To the fire in your hearth and the heat in your glance," which basically meant you're hot, and also probably a good cook. You try one on Lavender. To your smile, and for your elbows. She bursts into laughter and nearly spits her drink. Later, as things calm down and the hearth crackles low, you find yourselves nestled in the corner. The cousin waves off your worry with a wink. I told them you're newlyweds from a village I made up. Which village? Frogchester. Frogchester. Sounded official. Lavender rests her head on your shoulder. You feel the warmth of her, the pulse of music still humming in your bones. And for once, there's no fear. Only this, shared laughter, the taste of cider, and the faint smell of onions and ambition wafting from across the room. You leave just before the stars begin to fade. The dog follows you halfway home, then thinks better of it. As you walk back, hand in hand, Lavender says, "You know, I've never danced like that before." Me neither. Never flirted like that either. Especially the elbow part. She grins. I think I like Frogchester. Maybe we'll stay. Maybe. She kisses you under the fading stars. And in that moment, with sore feet, a full heart, and half a song still ringing in your ears, you realize. This is what freedom feels like. Not the grand escape. Not the dramatic speeches. But this. Dancing badly. Laughing freely. Loving loudly. Even if you smell slightly of turnips. You wake to bees. Not buzzing in your face, thankfully, but in the distance, humming through the lavender bushes like tiny, judgmental monks. The beekeeper cousin is already outside, humming with them, bare-handed, talking to her hives like they're old friends with strong opinions. Lavender is beside you in the hayloft, hair a wild halo, smiling in her sleep. You let her rest. But peace in the Middle Ages never lasts long. Because this morning, the gossip arrives. Not as a person, but as a rumor with legs. It starts with the baker's boy, who delivers bread with just a little too much smirk. Then a peddler wanders by and says, "You're the ones from Frogchester, aren't you?" Bold name for a village with no map. And finally, the beekeeper cousin tosses her veil on the hook and says, flatly, they know. You don't have to ask who. Or what. Your parents. Hers. The village. Possibly the priest. Possibly the dog from the alehouse. But the real kicker? Apparently, a cleric is coming. You nearly choke on your bread. A what? Lavender asks. A priest, the cousin says. Not a nice one. Not a quiet one. A sermon with spittle kind. From the town 2 hills over. Someone sent word about a wayward union. I'm guessing you two didn't register your spoon carving with the church. And just like that, your sweet little fugitive romance is about to be examined by the least romantic force in medieval life, celibate clerics with grudges and opinions. Because while love may ignore borders, the church doesn't. A mainstream historical fact, medieval clergy had enormous influence over marital and sexual norms. The church maintained records of legitimate unions, enforced laws about premarital behavior, and had the power to bless a relationship or condemn it. Confession booths were often just as much surveillance booths. And let's just say, subtlety wasn't their strength. You've both technically sinned, according to church law. You fled, kissed without permission, possibly shared a bed, you haven't, but facts rarely matter in moral interrogations, and worst of all, loved without a priest's approval. You remember old Father Brevik's sermons about the sins of lust, how simply thinking about someone's earlobe for too long could result in eternal damnation, or at the very least, an itchy rash. He once made a newlywed couple do penance because the bride smiled too long during the vows. Lavender groans and puts a pillow over her face. We're going to be sermon fried. You spend the day preparing like peasants going to war. You clean your tunic, re-braid your hair, and review every church rule you remember, which is not many. Lavender practices keeping a straight face. The cousin bakes bread because even impending moral judgment goes down easier with carbs. And then, right at sunset, he arrives. The priest. Tall, thin, wrapped in black wool like a shadow with opinions. His eyes scan the cottage, your faces, the honey jars. He says nothing for a long moment. Then, to your utter confusion, he sits. He removes his gloves. You are the couple. You nod. He folds his hands. You are not married. Another nod. You have been alone together. You try to think of the correct answer that won't end with goats thrown at you. We've spoken privately, Lavender says carefully. And danced. In an alehouse. The cousin coughs loudly to cover her laugh. The priest blinks. There was dancing. Yes, you say. Rhythmic. Slightly offbeat. But sincere. Silence. Then he sighs. I was expecting worse. Honestly, the way your village described it, I thought there'd be witchcraft. Or nakedness. Possibly goats. Well, Lavender says, there was one goat. You nudge her. The priest pinches the bridge of his nose. And then, another surprise. He pulls out a parchment scroll. If I marry you here and now, would you agree? You blink. What? I'm allowed, he says. If you both consent. Witness present. I'll document it. Quell the scandal. Spare you the ducking stool. My supper is still warm. I'd rather not return in the dark. You look at Lavender. She looks at you. Is this it? No grand cathedral. No veil. No lute players. Just this, a priest with a traveling cloak, a beekeeper with flour on her nose, and you are wearing yesterday's socks and clutching a piece of carved spoon in your pocket. Is that how marriage works now? Lavender whispers. I think it's how it's always worked, you whisper back. When it's real. You take her hand. We consent, you say. The cousin claps her hands together and says, I'll fetch the bread. And so, they're in a bee-scented cottage, standing beside someone who once winked at you over pears. You promise to love each other. The priest mumbles the rites. You say the words. Lavender laughs once during them on an obey her part, but quickly recovers. The cousin tears a loaf in half and hands you each a piece like it's holy, and honestly, it feels like it is. A quirky tidbit, in some medieval traditions, bread was used in wedding rituals. Couples broke loaves over each other's heads or shared them in symbolic acts of unity. It was practical. humble, nourishing. Just like this. When the priest leaves, he turns to you and says, "No more dancing." "Of course not," you lie. Later, you and Lavender sit under the stars, watching bees vanish into their hives. "We're married," she says, like she's still testing the word. You nod. "You smell like beeswax," she adds. "So do you." You lean your head against hers. No fanfare. No feast. No goat parades. But somehow, it's perfect. Because in a world where clerics snoop, rumors gallop, and elbows count as invitations to sin, you chose each other. Out loud. In daylight. With witnesses. And a loaf of bread. You wake up with crumbs in your hair, a bee on your elbow, and the word married echoing softly in your brain like it's still trying to fit itself in. Married. No veil. No dancing procession. No distant cousins in decorative tights. But it's done. Lavender's sleeping beside you, snoring lightly in the corner of the hayloft, and you're overcome with something between awe and mild panic. You're someone's spouse now. There's no reset button. No annulment through interpretive dance. Your first act as a husband? You shoo the bee off your arm with all the authority of a man who still smells faintly like old cider and candle wax. Later, over honey bread and lukewarm tea, the cousin smirks at you both. Still glowing, she asks. Lavender rolls her eyes. "We're fine." "Didn't say you were glowing," the cousin replies, nodding toward you. He looks like someone who just signed a treaty without reading it. You smile. Because, to be fair, she's not wrong. But as the day unfolds and you learn to say to my wife without laughing, you realize something odd. This bond between you and Lavender, this union that everyone wanted to control, restrict, or rewrite, suddenly feels sacred. Not because of the priest. Not because of the parchment. But because you both chose it. And in a world ruled by contracts, customs, and cloistered control, choice is holy. Which brings us, oddly enough, to monastic Tinder. Yes, you heard that right. Nunneries and flirtation. Because while your own love story has, for now, slipped safely under the church's radar, not every holy vow goes untested. Take, for instance, the curious case of Sister Maud. A mainstream historical fact, many medieval women were sent to nunneries not because of spiritual calling, but because their families couldn't afford to marry them off or didn't want to split an inheritance. Some of these women grew to love the monastic life. Others? Not so much. Sister Maud, legend says, had a habit of embroidering suspiciously flirty psalms into her altar cloths. Things like "His rod and his staff comfort me," followed by decorative vines. Not her most subtle work. And while nuns were meant to be cloistered, that didn't stop the occasional eye flutter through the convent grill or a shy smile during shared feast days. Historians still argue whether relationships between monks and nuns were common or exaggerated in folklore. What is known is that more than a few convents gained reputations as social centers where young noble women weren't just praying, they were choosing their paths. Sometimes those paths led straight out of the cloister and into someone's bed. A quirky tidbit, in 15th century Germany, a monastery and nearby nunnery reportedly had a secret tunnel connecting them. For convenience, they said. Allegedly used for sharing manuscripts and sacred texts. Unofficially, it became known as the Lover's Passage. Make of that what you will. Lavender hears this story from the cousin and nearly chokes on her bread. Tunnel dating, she says. Romance by candlelight and claustrophobia. You grin. Well, we had rivers and goats. It's all about location. You help the cousin clean up her hives that afternoon, carrying frames thick with honeycomb. Lavender joins, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with the blue ribbon you first wore. She's laughing. You're barefoot. For a moment, you forget priests, fathers, and every whispered shouldn't. Here, in the hum of bees and smell of lavender, love is simple again. Until the letter arrives. Delivered by a courier who refuses to step past the gate. He hands you a scroll, sealed with the mark of the abbess from the nearest nunnery. A woman known for stern eyes and sterner rules. Lavender reads it aloud. To the recently wed, whose union, while lawful, lacks proper spiritual grounding. You are summoned to attend the feast of St. Agnes at St. Audette's convent. Your presence is expected. Consider it a formal inspection of virtue. You both stare at the letter. Lavender mutters, "We're being summoned for a virtue inspection." Do they check under our nails, you ask? Or just sniff us for heresy? The cousin leans over and says, "Dress nice. Wear clean boots. Don't mention bees." And so, 3 days later, you walk through the high stone gate of St. Audette's, clutching each other's hands as if the air inside might try to separate you. You're met by rows of veiled women, stern-faced and silent. And then, from the center of them all, steps the abbess. She's tall. Sharp. Looks like she was carved from old stone and sheer willpower. Her eyes land on Lavender's blue-threaded braid, then on your mismatched boots. You brace for judgment. Instead, she says, "You'll sit near Sister Maud. She likes poetry." And just like that, the world tilts. Because inside these walls, behind all the hymns and incense, something else lives, understanding. Not everywhere. Not always. But here, in this moment, you're not just tolerated. You're seen. That night, at the feast of St. Agnes, you read a poem aloud. Not your best. A little awkward. Slightly rhyming. Definitely mentions goats. But when you finish, the abbess nods once. And Sister Maud actually smiles. Later, Lavender says, "You think they're secretly rooting for us." "I think," you say, "even people in Wimples remember what it feels like to choose." She kisses your cheek. Somewhere, deep in the convent, someone starts singing. And in the glow of candlelight, surrounded by women who gave their lives to God and still laugh at flirty psalms, you realize that love doesn't need a battlefield. Or a tavern. Or even a spoon. Sometimes, it just needs permission to exist. And sometimes, it finds it in the unlikeliest places. Like a nunnery. You wake in a borrowed convent cell that smells like candle wax and rosewater, head on Lavender's shoulder, her hair tickling your nose. You're safe. You're married. You're slightly itchy from the borrowed wool blanket, but that's beside the point. The nuns were kinder than you expected. No virtue tests. No public lashings. Just quiet nods, polite inquiries, and exactly one eyebrow raise when you and Lavender reached for the same bread roll at dinner. Now it's morning. Bells toll softly. Lavender is already up, brushing crumbs from her sleeves. She glances at you and says, "You're pale." "Romantic lighting," you reply. "No," she says, walking over and pressing a hand to your forehead. "You're actually pale." And just like that, your heart skips, not from love this time, but from something heavier. Because this is the Middle Ages. And the line between heartsick and actually sick is almost invisible. By noon, you're shivering. By sunset, you're in bed with a bucket and a nun fanning you with a hymnal. You're burning with fever, and Lavender refuses to leave your side. "It's probably just the cider," she says. but deep down, you both know better. This isn't some romantic swoon. It's not lovesickness or dramatic poetry fatigue. It's real, honest-to-goodness, deeply medieval illness. And in a time where no one knows about germs, and most medicine involves either leeches or prayers, or both, you're officially in trouble. A mainstream historical fact, in the Middle Ages, illness was often attributed to imbalances of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Physicians, if you were lucky enough to see one, would diagnose your malady based on your urine's colour, your dreams, or whether Mars was in retrograde. Standard treatments included bleeding, purging, and herbal tonics with names like Soothe the Gut and Please Don't Die. The nuns at St. Audette's are experienced healers. One applies a mustard poultice to your chest. Another brings vinegar-scented water. A third simply prays loudly in Latin while shaking a bell. Lavender just holds your hand and pretends she's not scared. You drift in and out. You dream of bees, and of dancing, and of your old hayloft. You think you see the priest again, only this time he's wearing antlers. It's probably the fever talking. When you wake, there's a cold cloth on your neck, and Lavender is whispering poetry you once wrote, badly, onto a fig leaf. I memorized it, she says. Even the line about goat eyes. You whisper, that was a metaphor. You said her gaze was startled yet wise. You smile, barely. You're not the only sick one in the convent. A few others lie in nearby beds, young and old, coughing softly through the night. You hear someone across the room mutter about the hot wind sickness and someone else mutter about sin. The abbess walks by at midnight, placing rosemary under pillows. It helps. A little. A quirky tidbit, in some medieval traditions, especially among folk healers, it was believed that placing certain herbs under the bed, or inside shoes, could ward off illness. Rue, yarrow, and sage were the heavy hitters. Some people even wore herbal necklaces to draw out the bad air. You currently have a necklace of garlic and lavender around your neck. It makes you smell like a very romantic soup. On the third day, your fever breaks. You wake soaked in sweat, lungs aching, mouth dry, but alive. Lavender sobs and curses, which is honestly quite touching. She presses her forehead to yours. You scared me. Scared myself. I thought you were going to die. You blink at her. You married me. There are no refunds. She laughs and sobs again, simultaneously. Idiot. You reach for her hand, and for the first time in days, it's you who's steady. I'm going to be okay, you whisper. And she nods. You're going to be better than okay. Later, over weak broth and dry bread, you sit wrapped in 2 blankets, watching the other patients. You realize that love here, the convent, the village, this whole messy, feverish world, isn't always about ribbon tokens or pear gifts or whispered poetry. Sometimes it's spoon-feeding someone broth. Or sitting through their fever dreams. Or refusing to leave their side even when you've been offered a much comfier bed. It's choosing someone again and again, not just in stolen glances or late-night bridges, but when their nose is running and they smell like damp cabbage. A nun walks past and says, "You'll want to eat more onions." Why? They ward off future fevers. You glance at Lavender. Romantic. She nods solemnly. Nothing says "I love you" like aggressively scented breath. By the end of the week, you're stronger. You walk the courtyard with her, arm in arm. You pass Sister Maud, who raises an eyebrow and says, "Survived your trial, then?" You nod. She smiles faintly. Most don't. She's joking. Probably. Still, you hold Lavender a little tighter. Because love in the Middle Ages is not guaranteed. Not safe. Not clean. But it's real. And if she's willing to read fig leaf poetry to your fever-drenched self under candlelight in a room full of coughing nuns, then you, my friend, are the richest man in Christendom. You leave the convent 2 weeks later with stronger legs, a clearer head, and a strong personal conviction never to eat onion broth again. Lavender walks beside you, cloak fluttering, cheeks wind-kissed and lovely in the way that makes you trip over your own boots. The road ahead is uncertain, your future isn't exactly embroidered in gold thread, but you're alive, and she's laughing, and that's more than enough. The cousin waves from the hives as you pass. If either of you catch fire, don't come crying to me, she shouts, which is her way of saying goodbye and take care. You travel for a few days, making your way through small towns and sleepy hamlets, hoping to find a place where no one recognizes your boots, your scandal, or your romantic spoon collection. It's in one of these towns, a modest trading post near the coast, that you find something unexpected. Foreign lovers. The market here is bigger, livelier, louder. You smell cinnamon and roasting chestnuts. You hear accents you can't place. And you see people who don't look like you. Men and women with dark skin and gold-threaded cloaks. Hair braided in elaborate styles. Jewelry you've never seen outside of merchant tales. You and Lavender stop to gawk at a stall selling blue silk and spice soap, mouths open like provincial goats seeing stained glass for the first time. A man behind the stall smiles at you. Like the scent. You nod. What is it? He answers with an accent smoother than the honey cakes on the cart beside him. Cardamom. Sandalwood. From across the sea. Lavender lifts a bar of the soap to her nose and breathes in deeply. You smell like royalty, she says to him. He laughs. My mother would be pleased. His name is Jamil. He's from Al-Andalus, or maybe further. You don't entirely understand the geography, but his presence here makes the town feel 10 times richer. And 10 times more complicated. Because as he speaks to Lavender, gently, kindly, curiously, you notice the shift. People stare. Some just blink. Others narrow their eyes. Later that evening, you hear muttering outside the inn, foreign traders and their smooth talk. He looked at her like she was his. Shouldn't be so familiar with our women. And just like that, your romantic holiday is pierced by the sharp, sour tang of familiar frowns. A mainstream historical fact, during the Middle Ages, Europe had sustained contact with Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia through trade, conquest, pilgrimage, and diplomacy. People of many skin tones lived, traveled, and worked across Europe. Some were scholars. Some were merchants. Some were enslaved. And some were lovers. But while these cross-cultural interactions shaped the world, they also ignited prejudice. You see it clearly now. Jamil is welcome enough when selling spices. But the moment he flirts, the temperature shifts. You and Lavender sit with him under an awning as dusk settles. He shares a handful of dates, sweet and sticky. He tells you about poetry from his homeland, how lovers send embroidered verses wrapped around pomegranates. Lavender sighs dreamily. That's better than pears. You grin. Blasphemy. Jamil smiles too. But it fades quickly. I had someone once, he says quietly. In Venice. We met under a prayer tower. Her uncle sent her away when he found out. You don't know what to say. Do you miss her? Lavender asks. I miss the version of the world where we were allowed, he replies. And there it is. The quiet truth that so many lovers, foreign, forbidden, or simply inconvenient, carry with them. The world doesn't always want your love to exist. And when it does, it often wants it boxed, labeled, and stripped of its power. You leave the market with heavy thoughts. That night, you and Lavender lie under a lean-to by the river. The stars above are impossibly bright. She presses close. "Do you think people would look at us like that?" she whispers. "If you wore gold earrings and I stopped brushing my hair, probably." She chuckles. "I hate that kindness can make people angry," she says. You nod. "I hate that skin or language or a ribbon in your hair can make someone a target." Silence. "Then I'd still buy his soap." You grin. "You already did." A quirky tidbit: in 13th century Spain, especially under Muslim rule in Al-Andalus, poetry about love, both heterosexual and homosexual, was celebrated, refined, and often shockingly bold by European standards. Some of this poetry crossed into Christian lands via trade routes and wandering minstrels. It's possible that many courtly love ideas were lifted, flavored, and rewrapped in European verse. You wonder if Jamil's pomegranate poems helped spark 1,000 romances, and how many of them were erased, simply because the wrong person fell in love. You reach for Lavender's hand. "Let's promise something," you say. If we ever hear someone mocking a love like his, we say something. Loudly, she adds. With impressive words, you say. "And maybe a slap. Only if necessary." She squeezes your hand. The river sings nearby. The stars burn softly above. Love, you realize, is not just about who you hold, but what you're willing to defend. Because when you've found it, truly found it, you recognize it in others, even the ones the world frowns at. And that recognition? That's how love survives. It starts with a bell. Not a church bell, this time. Something smaller. Tinny. Hung on a crooked wooden frame at the edge of the village green. Someone's been ringing it on and off all morning, and you've finally given up on pretending it's not calling your name. Lavender joins you, brushing crumbs from her cloak. What now? I think. You squint down the road. A fair. She tilts her head. What kind of fair? You already smell it before you see it: fresh hay, overcooked onions, the warm buzz of people gathering with too much enthusiasm and not enough elbow room. Yes. You, dear listener, are about to experience the thundering delight of a matchmaking fair. Also known as a love market, a single Sunday, or, if you're unlucky, your aunt's last desperate attempt to marry you off. This particular one is known as the St. Marjorie's Day Mixer, which sounds innocent enough, until you realize that every person here is either trying to be matched or trying to match someone else. You and Lavender hover at the edge of the green, wide-eyed. It's like an auction, she whispers. With more garlic, you reply. A mainstream historical fact: in many parts of medieval Europe, matchmaking fairs were real social events. Villages would designate a day, often tied to a saint's feast or seasonal celebration, when young people could gather for the express purpose of seeking spouses. Some even had official matchmakers, older women or minor clerics, who guided conversations and, in some cases, took notes. You've never been to one before. But it's impossible not to get swept up in the spectacle. There's dancing, of course. Always dancing. No lute, just a group of boys banging on spoons and someone with a reed pipe that sounds like a dying goose. Girls stand in loose circles, giggling behind their hands. Boys strut past with forced confidence, trying not to trip. Mothers hover like hawks. Fathers pretend not to be watching, but their eyes track every interaction like it's a sheep auction. You and Lavender try to blend in. It doesn't work. You're holding hands. You're not giggling. You're too relaxed, which immediately pegs you as outsiders or, worse, already spoken for. Which, technically, you are. But no one here knows that. And then it happens. You're approached by a woman with 3 teeth and a cape full of buttons. She points at you and says, "You'll do." You blink. "Sorry. For my niece." Strong arms. Nose could be straighter, but we can work with it. "I'm spoken for." Lavender steps closer. The woman eyes her. A rival? No, Lavender says sweetly. His wife. The woman blinks. Stares. Then walks off muttering, "Wife, eh? We'll see if that lasts." Lavender chuckles. Charming. You're still recovering when the dancing begins in earnest. Unlike the alehouse, where the mood was loose and tipsy, this dance is structured. A long line of men on one side, women on the other, and an elder at the end with a bell and a suspiciously judgmental dog. "Join in," someone shouts at you. It's tradition. And against your better judgment, you do. Lavender takes your hand. You join the end of the line. The dance begins. Step. Turn. Clap. Trade partners. Spin. Return. It's simple, dizzying, and entirely designed to expose your ability to maintain eye contact without tripping over someone's ankle. As the music speeds up, Lavender leans close and whispers, "Do you think anyone knows we're married?" Doubt it. Should we tell them? Absolutely not. It's more fun to be mysterious. You spin again. Clap. Step. Almost fall into a basket of parsnips. A quirky tidbit, in some parts of medieval France, matchmaking fairs included love lotteries. Young men would draw the names of local women from a box and be paired for the day. If they got along, they might continue the courtship. If not, they were allowed to trade slips, twice. After that, they were expected to dance politely and accept fate. You imagine drawing Lavender's name from a box. You imagine being told you couldn't. Your chest tightens just thinking about it. By mid-afternoon, the fair shifts gears. Now come the tokens, ribbons, bracelets, little carved trinkets. Giving one to someone is a soft declaration of interest. Accepting it? A maybe. Rejecting it? A social death spiral. You and Lavender watch from a bench as a nervous boy tries to offer a girl a tiny wooden bird. She laughs. Not unkindly, but firmly. He walks away, clutching the bird like a broken dream. Lavender sighs. Glad we skipped this part. You already gave me underpants, you remind her. Doll underpants. Still counts. She leans against you. What would you give me if we were meeting for the first time right now? You look around. Think. Then you grab a handful of dandelions, twist the stems together into a lopsided circle, and place it on her head like a ridiculous crown. There. I look like a cow. A royal cow. She kisses your cheek. It's getting late. The sun tilts west. The fair begins to fade, ribbons tied, hopes crushed, future contracts quietly murmured by fire pits. You and Lavender walk hand in hand, content to be unnoticed. As you pass a pair of matchmakers scribbling in their ledgers, one looks up. You too. What's your status? Lavender glances at you. Complicated, she says, with a wink. And the two of you walk off before they can ask more. That night, back at the inn, you lie awake thinking about how much of medieval love is performance. Dance steps. Ribbons. Tokens. rules. But here, tangled in a hay-stuffed mattress, sharing jokes and candlelight with someone who knows you passed the performance, you find something else. Not a match. A choice. It's well after midnight when you wake to the sound of scratching. Not rats, thankfully. You've dealt with rats before, and this is sharper. More deliberate. Someone outside is dragging a stick, or maybe a boot, across the side of the inn wall. Lavender stirs beside you. Did you hear that? You nod. She sits up, hair wild, eyes suddenly sharp. Do you think it's my father again? You shake your head. If it were, the door would already be off the hinges. You creep to the window and peer out. Moonlight. Fog curling through the trees. A single figure, cloaked, hunched, holding something wrapped in linen. It's a girl. Maybe 15. She sees you watching and gestures. You open the shutters. I need your help, she whispers. I heard people say you two ran away. Chose each other. Even got married without permission. Who told you that? She shrugs. The baker's nephew. He's not subtle. Lavender's behind you now. Why are you here? The girl steps closer. Because I'm in love with someone I can't have. And they're sending me away. There's a pause. The fog swallows the silence like a secret. I don't want to go, she adds. I want to stay. Or leave. With him. Who's him, you ask? She pulls back the cloth in her hands. Inside, a carved bone comb. A sprig of rosemary. A locket made from beaten copper, crudely etched with 2 initials. You don't recognize them. That's good. If you knew him, you'd have to lie. Lavender says softly, you want us to help you run. I want to know how you did it. Ah. There it is. You climb out of the window and sit on the sill, feet dangling over dew-slick grass. Honestly, you say, we didn't. Not really. We just moved fast enough that no one could stop us. The girl frowns. So, no plan. Oh, we had plans, Lavender says, and then they all unraveled. So we made new ones. Like where to go. No idea. What to say to people. Mostly made that up. The girl looks crushed. Then she asks, was it worth it? You look at Lavender. She smiles, eyes tired, lips soft. You nod. Every scratch and blister. She steps closer. Did you ever regret it? A beat. Then, both together, no. The girl exhales like she's been holding her breath for weeks. A mainstream historical fact, medieval elopements were more common than official records suggest. While many marriages were arranged through families, property deals, or political alliances, couples still defied expectations, escaping by night, marrying in secret, or even falsely claiming they'd already slept together just to force their parents' hands. Some priests refused to perform such ceremonies. Others, like yours, did them quietly to keep couples out of scandal. But not every elopement ended with a honey-scented cottage and celebratory spoon carving. Some ended in annulments. Or punishments. Or the gallows, in rare cases. The girl's story pours out now. She's the daughter of a modest merchant. Promised to a man 20 years older. Dowry settled. No room for protest. But then came him. A fellow apprentice. He kissed her behind the grain shed and called her his starlight. He has no money. No prospects. But she'd rather scrub floors beside him than wear pearls beside a stranger. Lavender takes the girl's hand. What's your name? Ellsworth. Ellsworth, what do you want us to do? She hesitates. Just tell me how to make it not fall apart. You and Lavender look at each other and laugh. Not unkindly. Just knowingly. It will fall apart, you say. 100 times. But you'll put it back together, Lavender adds. That's what makes it love, not just escape. You invite Ellsworth inside, feed her cold bread and warm milk, and let her sleep by the hearth. In the morning, you help her write a letter. Not a love letter. A truth letter. One that says, I choose him. I don't expect you to understand, but I ask you to let me go. It's more courage than most people show in their whole lives. A quirky tidbit, in a small 14th century court case from Lincolnshire, a young woman was charged with enticement into sin after writing her own marriage contract and persuading a friar to witness it without parental consent. The judge ruled in her favor, citing divine inclination over worldly design. It's one of the earliest known wins for love over logistics. Before she leaves, Ellsworth hugs Lavender fiercely and says, "If I ever carve a spoon, I'll think of you." Then she disappears into the trees, headed toward someone who waits with nothing but hope and a three-legged donkey. You both watch her go, hearts full and slightly aching. She's brave, you say. She's us, Lavender replies. Later, over tea, you stare at your own hands. So used to building fires, holding her hand, scribbling poems with dull charcoal. Now there's something more. You've become an example. Unintentionally, but undeniably. Love, it turns out, is contagious. Not the sweet-smelling, festival kind. The real kind. The kind that tells someone trembling in the night, you're not the only one. The road pulls you forward again. Not because you're running. Not anymore. Just drifting. Two pieces of dandelion fluff floating on a breeze of baked bread smells and whispered what nexts. Lavender walks a few paces ahead, singing to herself. Not a ballad, not a psalm, just something made up and tuneless, with the word turnip featured prominently. It's awful. You love it. You're nearing the coast now. The salt in the air curls your hair and dries your lips. Seagulls cackle from a crooked rooftop. You spot a distant ship on the horizon, white sails snap taut with wind, riding low with trade goods, or maybe letters no one wants to read. But today, you've arrived in a village you've never heard of, and apparently, they're having a wedding. Not yours this time. Someone else's. You're both invited in the way strangers are always invited to village events, with cautious stares and a plate of pickled things. Eat, the old woman says. Or you'll offend St. Arnulf. You're not sure who that is, but you've already got a beet in your mouth before asking. And just like that, you're guests at a local marriage rite, which is absolutely nothing like the one you had. This one is loud. Raucous. A blend of ancient superstition and practical chaos. The groom wears fur boots. The bride is covered in ribbons and onion peels, for reasons no one can explain. The village priest looks drunk. Someone releases a goose inside the church mid-blessing. Lavender whispers, "This is incredible." You whisper back, "Should we clap for the goose?" A mainstream historical fact, local and regional customs often shaped medieval weddings more than the church did. In many areas, traditions predated Christianity, incorporating folk magic, fertility rites, or protective talismans into the celebration. It wasn't uncommon to see shoes thrown across thresholds, garlic hung from door frames, or the couple walked 3 times around a tree before saying vows. Here, they circle a bonfire. Not once. Not twice. 7 times. Lavender tugs you closer as the couple makes their rounds, faces flushed, the crowd cheering louder with every lap. You both start counting, but lose track somewhere around for when a girl near you drops a tray of goose eggs and someone trips over the bride's ribbon train. Eventually, there's clapping. Toasting. A man dressed as a stag dances through the square to bless their union. You're told not to look directly at him or you'll dream of rabbits. You look anyway. You definitely dream of rabbits. Later that night, after you've shared roasted fish, goat cheese, and some wine that tastes like regret, an old woman corners you by the fire. "You're sweet," she says. "You and your girl." You smile. "Wife." "Good," she nods. "Better when you call it what it is." She taps your shoulder with a bone-handled cane. "Be sure to mark your door with chalk," she adds. "Keep out bad spirits." You thank her politely and have absolutely no idea what she's talking about. Then she tells you the story of her own wedding. 60 years ago. A match set by her father. She barely knew the man. But on their wedding day, he gave her a pair of boots lined with rabbit fur. "He knew I hated cold toes," she says. "That's when I decided to love him." You glance at Lavender, standing across the fire, laughing at something the ribbon bride said. Her face is soft in the orange light, her hands moving as she tells a story you can't hear. You already decided to love her. You've been deciding that every day since you gave her the pair. Since you danced on muddy floors. Since you woke sweating in a convent and found her hand in yours. It's not a one-time thing, this love. It's a constant choosing. The old woman reads your silence and pats your hand. Remember, she says, it's not just about who stands beside you. It's about who keeps walking beside you when the songs end. A quirky tidbit, in some medieval German villages, it was customary for newlyweds to spend the first night sleeping with a witness nearby, often a family member or midwife, who was there to ensure consummation occurred. In less intrusive communities, the couple simply had to show stained bed linens the next morning. And in some rare cases, they just held hands and claimed it happened, and no one asked further. You're extremely glad you didn't have to prove anything involving sheets. After the feast, Lavender pulls you toward the edge of the village, up a little hill where the wind carries bits of song and wood smoke. You both sit on a stone wall. I like that wedding, she says. Even the goose. Especially the goose. You look out at the sea. Black water. Moonlight stitched through the waves. Do you think we'll do something like that someday? She asks. You know, a celebration. A party. With people who know us. Who cheer for us. You think for a moment. Maybe we'll throw one just for fun. Call it a non-wedding. Serve all the food we actually like. Dance badly. No priest. And a goose. Obviously. She leans into you, warm and drowsy. I'd marry you again. You kiss her hair. Good, you whisper. Because I'd ask you again. You fall asleep there, eventually, curled up like two kids too full of joy and fish to move. And as you drift off, you dream of fur boots and bonfires and chalk markings on doors. Of a love that doesn't just defy rules. It rewrites them. The wind changes the next morning. You feel it before you open your eyes, a shift in the air, the kind that smells like departure. Something is ending. Or beginning. Or both. Lavender wakes slowly, blinking into the pale sky, then sighs. We've almost run out of road. You sit up, stretch, and look out over the cliffside. Below, the sea swells against jagged rocks. Gulls scream in that way that sounds judgmental, like they saw you trip that one time and will never forget. What do we do now? She asks. And you realize this question is heavier now than it was before. You're not just a runaway anymore. Not just a secret, or a scandal, or a stolen kiss hiding in haylofts and fig trees. You're a husband. She's a wife. You've loved through court rituals, pair exchanges, nun-stared fevers, and matchmaking fairs with emotionally damaged geese. Now what? You walk down winding paths toward a new village, smaller than the last. The streets are muddy. The baker sells oatcakes that taste like wet socks. A sign on the door of a crooked house reads, "Midwife." Teeth pulling. Laundry. Multi-talented, lavender murmurs. You pass a crumbling church. A boy with 2 teeth offers to sell you a blessed rock. You buy it. It's not blessed. It's barely a rock. But it makes Lavender laugh. Later, over soup that is suspiciously grey, you hear someone whisper your names. Not your real ones, but the ones the villagers have started giving you. The lover's on the run. They say she bewitched him, someone says. They say he was promised to a noble girl and gave it up for a spoonmaker's daughter. You sip your soup. Lavender kicks your shin under the table. You smile at her. Let them talk. Let them spin tales. Because somewhere along the way, your story became something bigger than the truth. A mainstream historical fact, many real medieval love stories were eventually absorbed into folklore. Some couples were never named, just known as the miller's daughter or the shepherd's son. Their details blurred, their endings changed, but the heart of it, love despite the rules, stayed intact. It became lesson, warning, dream. You and Lavender walk out of town as twilight bleeds into violet. I don't mind being a story, she says. As long as we get a good ending, you reply. She loops her arm through yours. We make our own ending. You reach a stretch of coast where the land forgets itself. Just cliffs and grass and clouds. No signs. No bells. No angry fathers or inquisitive friars. Just sky. You sit on a flat stone. The wind tugs at your cloaks. Below, waves roar. She takes your hand. Let's say she begins, 100 years from now, someone tells our story. Okay. They say we were reckless. We were. They say we defied the church. Technically true. They say we kissed in the shadow of abbey walls and ran barefoot through convent gardens and carved each other's names into tree bark. You glance at her. Did we carve our names into a tree? She grins. We could. You nod. Add it to the legend. She continues, voice softer now. And they say, we stayed together. That quiets you. Because that's the thing, isn't it? All these customs, these courtships, these rituals, you've navigated them like a cart with one wheel. Dancing through taboos. Ducking under sermons. Whittling love out of borrowed spoons and blue ribbons. But the hardest part? Is staying. So you make a new vow. Not the kind with priests or parchment. Not the kind whispered in the dark. This one said with wind in your face and salt on your tongue. I'll stay, you say. Even when the firewood's wet and the cheese is moldy. Lavender grins. I'll stay, even when you write more poems about goats. Especially then. A quirky tidbit, in certain medieval marriage traditions, couples were encouraged to plant a tree together after their union, a symbol of long growth and shared roots. Some even marked anniversaries by tying cloth to its branches, adding to it year by year. You don't have a tree nearby, but you tie your blue ribbon to the end of her braid again. It's enough. And now, sweet listener, as the last echo of hoofbeats and honeyed vows fade into the dusk, as the lovers step off the page and into legend, as the final sparks of the fire die down, let's breathe together, slowly. Close your eyes. Picture a crooked stone cottage on a windswept cliff. A hearth lit, gently crackling. 2 cloaks hung by the door. Spoons carved by an unskilled but very devoted hand. A ribbon tucked in a book of poems. A cat curled in a basket. A bowl of pears, slightly overripe. You're safe here. You're warm. The world outside may still bristle with rules and rituals, with priests and dowries and suspicious dancing geese. But in here, the choice is yours. You chose love, and it chose you back. Let the wind hum its lullaby. Let the past fall quiet behind us. Tomorrow, perhaps, the world will frown again. But tonight, it smiles. Now hush. And sleep. You're home.